Education to order. Welcome to those joining us in person and online. Please rise as you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First up this evening is a special Laker Pride, and I will turn it over to Dr. Thomas for this.
Thank you, Chair Bolian, Board Directors. I'm actually going to go to the podium, if I may. Okay, we've got a very special evening this evening to recognize our retirees who have committed so much of their time and their talent to the betterment of our community and our students. And we are going to give them, as it's kind of labeled, cheers to many years. Not everyone is in attendance this evening, but we will make sure those who were not able to be with us physically will get them their certificate. And each retiree will receive a Prior Lake Savage Area Schools medallion. And on the back of the medallion, it states, "Thank you for helping all learners reach their full potential." Now, I know the mayor has medallions, and maybe you can get discounts in Prior Lake with that. I don't know if this will do the same, but, you can try. You can try. It doesn't hurt. But we want to say thank you to all of our retirees, and you have truly made an impact and a difference in the lives of so many in our community, and we are forever grateful for that. So I will read off the names of the individuals, and those who are present, please come forward and I will get you your certificate and your medallion. First is Trudy Adderley. She is an ECSE teacher at Edgewood, and she has 19 years in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. She will not be with us this evening, but congratulations to Trudy. Next, I would like to call Sarah Bowman forward, 4th grade teacher at Five Hawks, 26 years of service to our Prior Lake Savage Area community. And those of you who are here, I'm going to ask that you just hold tight. Afterwards, we'll have all of you just go right around the corner here. We'll do a group photo. Christy will get a Laker Pride backdrop with all of you. So thank you. Congratulations, Sarah. Next, we have Andrea Karen, social worker at HRE. 20 years of service, and she is not able to be with us this evening. We have Pam Dewar, 5th grade teacher at Red Tail Ridge, 29 years of service. Please come on forward, Pam. Congratulations to you. All right. Next, we have Rebecca Fonder, early childhood teacher at Edgewood, 26 years of service here in the district, is not able to be with us this evening. We have Pam Geifer, who is a communications teacher at Hidden Oaks, 20 years of service, also not able to be with us this evening. Kim Kep, social worker at Hidden Oaks, come on forward, 20 years of service, and really proud of the work that you've done for us in the district. Okay. All right. Next, we have Heidi Murray, 3rd grade teacher at Glendale, 20 years of service teaching our young ones. Come on forward, Heidi. Congratulations. We have Karen Russell, who is a speech language pathology teacher at Jeffers Pond. 30 years of service in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. Fantastic. She's not able to be with us. Oh, is she here? Oh, she is here. Let me make sure you didn't get snuck to the back of my stack. Yeah, I had you down differently. Sorry about that. Yeah, we will get your certificate. Okay, Jill Selchow, fax teacher at Twin Oaks, 23 years of service. And then we have Allison Zach, who's a peer coach at Hidden Oaks, 20 years of service, not able to be with us this evening. And then, I don't know, let me see if I have, is Principal Sherman, Katie, is she here tonight? Yes. She is, come on forward, building principal. 5 Hawks, 6 years, and many years in education, and congratulations to you. All right. Okay. We have Joan. Now we're going to look at support staff. Joan Friedland is a child nutrition site manager at Red Tail Ridge. 26 years of services here in the district. Not able to be with us this evening. Brenda Getch, ECFE teaching assistant at Edgewood. 23 years in the district. Not with us this evening. Cheryl Haugen, finance, student support admin assistant right here at the DSC. Cheryl had 18 years of service with us here at the district and is not here. She had a little early retirement, so she's really been kicking it really nicely already. But we roasted her across the parking lot over at the pizza spot. And Renee Kaiser Mulliken, ECSE Para at Edgewood. She's been with us for 8 years, not with us this evening. Carrie, get this right, Kimig, child nutrition assistant site manager at Westwood. She has 7 years of service here in our district. Next, we have Lisa Kraft, admin assistant to assessment and academics here at the DSC, 14 years of service. She's not able to join us this evening. We have Michael Mahoney, custodian at Hidden Oaks Middle School, 7 years of experience here in our district and will be retiring, not with us this evening. Deborah Maxfield, early childhood teaching assistant at Edgewood, 14 years of service here in our community, and we thank her for that. Deborah Prazik, child nutrition site manager at Westwood, 32 years of service here in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, not able to join us this evening. Steve Raby at the high school, come on down, custodian, 20 years of service at the high school. He didn't make it this evening? Okay. Well, I have him that he was going to sneak by. Well, we'll make sure that we congratulate him when he comes forward. Terry Schoenbauer, come on forward, benefit specialist here at the DSC, and she has 16 years of service here with us. Yeah. Terry was twinning today, too. She goes out in style. Make sure that she's not forgotten, because her twin was all with us with the shirts. Same shirts almost today. And we have Sherry Sorensen, Child Nutrition Services at Westwood for 20 years, serving our community. Not with us tonight. Lisa Tice, Health Aide at Glendale for 20 years of service to our community. Thank her for that. Diane Torrey, lead custodian at Hidden Oaks, 21 years, and we really appreciate you for that. Diane. Then we have this other person, Martha Walls, and she has spent 33 years here at the DSC supporting pretty much everyone in this entire district, and she's not able to be with us. She's already enjoying retirement in Colorado Springs, so good for her. Joni Wendt, lead custodian at Twin Oaks, spent 5 years here with us and not able to join us. And then lastly, we have Carlene Needham, admin assistant and special ed at Westwood for 15 years, not able to join us this evening. And those are the retirees that we want to say cheers to the many years of your service in our community. We thank you so much for everything that you've done, and may you all have an enjoyable, relaxing, and blessed retirement. And may we all see you back here as volunteers. All right, Chair, I have one more, and those of you who want to pop out, and Christy will get your picture. And just, I want to say thank you to Obioma Osuji, our student board rep. Just a couple of weeks ago, we celebrated your leadership within our district, also within the state of Minnesota, for being recognized and awarded a MSBA board scholarship. And so congrats to you. That's a testament to the type of caliber and man you are. And so thank you so much for being that leader in our district. And also, we want to thank you for a wonderful year of meaningful leadership and service to our school board and to our community. We are just always impressed with the caliber of folks that come and help support us. So Obioma, I would like to present you a certificate as well as a medallion. Congratulations. Chair Bullion, those are the recognitions that I have for this evening for Laker Pride.
Very good. Thank you so much. I'd just like to say on behalf of the board, and extending our gratitude to all the retirees for their dedication, the years of service to the students and the staff and the community. It's incredible, the relationships that have been made over all those years. And then Obi has stepped out to get his picture taken, but really a special thank you to him. It has been such a privilege getting to know him, having the opportunity to do my very first scholarship recommendation was to Obi. And he sat with me and we did that together, and I'm so grateful and so happy that he was awarded that. He'll do that scholarship proud. So, next up is the public forum. Do we have any speakers today? I didn't see that, Danny. Okay, very good. We'll move on to the next thing in our agenda, which is the purpose and agenda, and I will turn it over to you, Dr. Thomas, for that.
Thank you, Chair Bullion, Board Directors. This evening, for our study session, we have a variety of topics that we'll uncover and dig a little further into. First and foremost, we'll talk a little bit about the bus contract discussions and where we're at with that, along with Prior Lake Bus Company and Collaborative Student Transportation, or you'll hear the acronym CST. And then we'll also walk through some preliminary budget reviews prior to the board taking action in June. And then we will extend our conversation from our last meeting, where we will share with you sample ballot question language that, based upon the determination of the dollar allotment, that we would then craft what that campaign would look like in terms of making strategic investments around core academics, et cetera. And then a brief sharing of our major magnitudes, field trips that we have taken this past year. Director Chuka will talk a little bit about our language access plan for MLs, ensure that we have access to the content, superintendency evaluation, and then a close with the update of the superintendent search. And there will not be any policies tonight.
Very good. So the next item for discussion regarding the Prior Lake School Bus Association contract, discussion only with board action scheduled for June 8th. And I will Turn it over to you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Bully and Board Directors, and I'll be turning this over to Director Ryder in just a moment, but I just want to thank our internal team for their leadership in working through some negotiations with our transportation providers, and I also want to give a special thank you to our Prior Lake School Bus Association. They have been wonderful to work with, and I know that they are committed to supporting high-quality transportation in our district, and I think we've had a really good, insightful conversation and negotiations process, as well as looking at some additional opportunities with collaborative student transportation with some auxiliary transportation needs that would come outside of our general busing contract and special ed contract as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Ryder.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. We have began the process of having conversations with the various different vendors. As you recall, last meeting, you heard from us regarding the routing side of things. Tonight, we're talking about the service contract for our transportation, and there were two of them that we asked to be able to go to the table with and have conversations around. In the process of doing so, I think that we have found some nice blending that might be able to help solve some of the issues and concerns that exist now with the timing of things with 3 tiers. It can get kind of tight to be able to accommodate all of the needs, particularly when you get midway through the year and then you have some additional, some adds to the list of needs that weren't necessarily planned on at the beginning of the year, right? And so that's where the collaborative student transportation contract will most likely come into play, is going to be in those areas of how do we accommodate maybe that McKinney-Vento student or a care and treatment student that needs to go, and the timing of it throughout the day just doesn't necessarily fit well with our current routes that are already established with Prior Lake School Bus Association, and can they assist us then in that process? So there are rates, and what we found is we actually have a contract that has been in place with them, and we've just not used it more recently. And so the fact of the matter is, moving forward, this would be something that is intended to be out there also for a 5-year agreement. The details of which I think board members have been able to see, but it's under legal review. So at this point in time, we're really not sharing that with the public until it is more final. At the June 8th, that will be public. I guess I'm open to answer any of those questions, but just to try and help you understand how are we going to utilize the two of them together. It'll be a blend, but the primary source of our services for all to and from school for gen ed students, as well as the majority of our special education services, will be with the Prior Lake School Bus Association.
Good. Open it up for any questions or discussion, board members? Dr. Atkinson, can I start with you?
Sure, yeah. I just have a question. One thing that can you help me understand? It says out-of-district transportation in both of the contracts. What is our legal requirements for providing? I was not aware that we provided out-of-district transportation. Can you help me understand that, what that means?
When we have students who are, like McKinney-Vento is all about students who may move from, they're in our district, we're serving them, but they may have something that occurs within their life that requires them to be outside of the district for a residence, and yet they are going to attend our schools. And so there is, when that's the case, then there is McKinney-Vento statute that then tells that we can go ahead and arrange that transportation, transport that student so that they are able to continue with their year with us, so that there is continuation, and what's best for the student is always what's looked at. And so when that's the case, then that is special transportation, and it is coded uniquely separately and is reimbursed then 100% at this point in time from MDE. So that's how that kind of works. Similarly, you might have something like a care and treatment where a student needs to go for a period of time, and that falls into that same kind of similar category.
Okay, so it's very special circumstances.
Very
It's not
specific
not
and-
that we're transporting all out-of-district students.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
That's
Unique
helpful. Yeah, that
circumstances.
makes sense. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Can I go down the line? Director Mason, do you have any questions or discussion
No, I
items?
think all of mine were answered, thank you.
Okay, Director Olsted? I don't have anything. Director France?
Yes, thank you very much. And by the way, I love the simplicity of the contract that's before us, and hopefully this goes through. We had a couple surprises in the last couple of years, particularly like with the cost of field trips, transportation during high traffic times and things like that. And this contract seems to simplify that down and make the cost very, very transparent, which I like. But you made a comment in your opening statement about we already had a contract, but we weren't following it. I'm a little confused by that, or we weren't using it.
What I mean is there is a standing contract with Collaborative Student Transportation that the district had out there. And so we just haven't utilized them for many services, if
okay,
any
that.
at all. And so therefore it wasn't ever needed by us.
Not with the Prior Lake Bus
No,
Association?
no,
Okay.
I didn't mean for that to be the, no, mhm.
So, from what I'm seeing here, you know, and what I heard over the last couple of years was that, that there were some surprise costs that were coming up, not only with fuel costs and the increase in fuel costs, but also there was something about, and the only reason why I know this is because I was sponsoring a couple of field trips. My company was, and I was. And there was something about trying to get the bus out of there during rush hour and how that was going to cost so much more. This does not, the wording in here has nothing to do with rush hour. It has everything to do with the amount of hours.
Right.
And it is, so I assume that's a change and we're not going to have those surprises.
I don't believe that we will find ourselves in those predicaments as much. I think, I mean, there's always exceptions, right? So I can't say that for sure, right? But I would say that we have taken a very slow approach to the conversations around every bit of this contract with the parties and with Michelle Chuka and Dan Powers and myself, and at times Dr. Thomas as well, representing the district. I mean, it was like, we wanted to understand this. Exactly what does this mean? How does this really work from your perspective at the bus company? And what does it mean to our, you know, our students, our families, and even our administrators, right? And so there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversations around, well, this is the issue we've run into at times, and that's what we need to try and solve. So a lot of solution finding, I think, was what we were trying to really strive for in the creation of this contract. And we did start from a master contract from MDE. We enveloped the RFP requirements that we had, and then also our current contract, making sure that we understood. So we were using 3 different documents to make sure that we were kind of having something that in the end kind of addresses all of our needs. And it currently is in for legal review between both attorneys. So I think we're feeling pretty good about what we have before us at this point.
It does look a lot cleaner from what I had seen a few years ago. And the other thing that I just wanted to point out, because I think it's really important that people understand that the bus company requires the district to determine if there's going to be an inclement weather day by 5 a.m. and let them know, which I'm hoping we can communicate to families who then, when the weather forecasts the night before don't turn out exactly as planned, either for or against, that there's a lot of dependencies that need to be done, and so when they get that call in the morning saying school's canceled, and yet the weather doesn't turn out so bad that we had to make the decision very early on before we knew.
No, and we also have other employees within the district that are here by that point in time too, in the morning, or leaving home to get here. And so it's important that those hours are, I mean, it is really early in the morning. Many districts are moving more towards making that decision as much as possible the night before. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Director
Nothing for me.
Smith? Nothing for you.
Director Belling, I actually have one other question.
Sure.
It looks like we'll be making a rollout of cameras on all the buses. Is that correct?
That is a requirement we did ask for in the RFP. Currently, not all of our cameras have that, and so we are looking for a plan. Yep.
No buses.
Say again?
Sorry.
Okay,
Not
I
all of our
understand.
buses have that.
All of them do, sorry.
Yeah, no, I
Did I say it
understand.
wrong?
So as far as what can families expect? What will that look like from a parent standpoint? We hear about.
Yeah, so I think at this point in time, our buses do not have them at this moment, right? But what is typically seen on school buses would be one in the front, one in the back. And the purpose of that oftentimes is really just for ability to be able to really understand what may have occurred if there's an issue, you know? And so when something comes up that needs to be addressed, the contact will be made to the bus company. They'll take a look at the information. They'll share that information with administrators within the schools, and if there's any further conversation or dialogue, that will be determined and addressed at that point in time. But it just kind of helps to kind of understand, you know, what exactly took place.
Okay. So, but just from expectations, it'll be a rolling change. It won't be all buses the first
Oh,
year.
I'm
and
sorry.
That's
Yes,
okay.
no.
I'm just, like I said, what can
Yeah,
our
so
community
initially,
expect for
I
that?
think initially, we already have some cameras on the vans, and those will be made audible, as well as the camera. Beyond that, then, it will be a rolling cycle as to the buses, then that would be, we have added in Appendix B of the contract, a list of all of the buses, and anything that comes in new that is purchased, that will come already prepared, because oftentimes, nowadays, the easiest way to get those things in place is to have it right from the get-go, and it's just kind of made a part of the bus.
Are there any other things that our parents should know about that would be enhancements made with this contract?
I
that would-
think that they will find, not so much with the contract itself, but our whole process in moving forward with transportation, and including the opportunities with the new software will afford us greater communication ability with our families, both from a perspective of them being able to know where the bus is, as well as then us communicating if there is something they need to know much more easily.
Right, thank you.
Anything else? All right, going on to the next agenda item is the collaborative student transportation discussion. Board action is also anticipated for June 8th. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Bowling. We kind of talked about both of them all at the same time just now.
Oh,
so-
sorry.
Nope.
That's my bad. Okay, next then is the final preliminary budget review. This is report and discussion. Final board action will be requested at the June 8th board meeting. And so I will turn it back over to you, Director Ryder, for that.
Thank you. I'm just gonna. So I would like to walk through this memo. Attached within in the board packet is a list of all of the adjustments that were included in our, what I'll say, our budget adjustments that in most cases reduced our expenditures for certain areas and totaled around that $4.1 million in total with some revenue and expenditure combinations. That list is now highlighted, as was suggested, in the area. Here, I'll pull it up so people in the public can understand what I'm talking about. So this was our list, and we highlighted then and shaded the areas in yellow under the category for those that were non-student facing, and everything that is white is considered student facing, and at the bottom of the entire list, and the list you've seen in the past few meetings, so there's nothing new added there except for the highlighting. And then you can see at the bottom a breakdown of the non-student facing reductions and adjustments compared and included with these student facing adjustments with a $4.258 million included there. So taking that list, we applied it to line items within the budget. We've gone through and double checked the comparison of those. And making sure that positions in the departments are all listed and identified. And in that process, then we have now a sum total of everything in our general fund, all of the funds. What you're seeing at the very start of this memo that we have for a narrative for the entire budget process, the preliminary budget and included the 5-year financial projections. So we have the funds listed here with the general fund, food service fund, community education fund, debt service fund, trust fund, custodial fund, internal service fund, and irrevocable trust. The resolution that is also attached in the packet basically shows the total revenues that you're seeing there and the expenditures, those 2 columns, and that's what's in the resolution. That is what the board takes action on. I did add a column here for the purpose of the memo to show the increase or decrease to a fund balance. So you can see what is happening there. In all but 2 of the funds, you see an increase. And on the community education fund, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's a planned spend down. The revocable trust for OPEB and Fund 25, that's typically where we spend more than what we're bringing in. And that is something we have to then levy for some of those dollars as well. The general fund overview, this is an attempt here for me to show kind of what are the points that were used, or the, assumptions used in the various different areas that we want to make note of. And so a couple of things that, as the week has gone, that have come up to my attention is, in talking with our principals, I think that it's probably more appropriate for us to utilize the averaging. And so, we have the Gen Ed formula number 1, but number 2 then is the class size district-wide average for elementary is 25.98. That's easy for us to calculate because it's all on a spreadsheet. We've got that all laid out. When it comes to the secondary class sizes, that's a little bit more challenging. So, I had put in an average of 25 to 36. What I'm hearing from them is that the secondary level is probably more accurate to say an average of around 34. So I will modify that in the memo for your June 8th meeting. Next, then we have number 3, the enrollment overall has shown in this particular prepared budget for next year a decrease of 125 average daily membership, ADM, and that is for the early childhood through grade 12. And you can see the numbers there listed. We are including in number 4 a 13% increase in the health insurance premium costs and a 10% increase on the dental insurance premium costs. And in most contracts, that cost is falling to the district. The projected unassigned fund balance for the general fund is 8.8% with these assumptions. And this does include the non-spendable and assigned class size reduction. We'll come back to this as we get to page 10. That's probably the best place to kind of read and compare these 2 things, or this statement and the actual detail. So we'll see that in a little bit. Number 6 is the FY27 projected unassigned fund balance. It is projecting that we are going to exceed revenues and will exceed expenditures by about $470,185. And that will add to our fund balance. The adopted budget will be revised. I want to make note of that. That is an annual thing that is done, so we can anticipate that happening once we know the start of the school year. We know our federal updates and allocations for sure. We know our staffing, if there's any adjustments made at the last minute due to enrollment. We will know our audited fund balances before we revise that budget. And those are facts that you want to be able to make meaningful adjustments to the budget so that it is more reflective of what to expect. The rest of this page is really about talking about each of the different types of areas of revenue. And so you've got your basic allowance, you've got special ed, referendum. And as we take a look at these things, special education, just a note that it's 1 year in arrears, the revenue is. So our revenue for 26-27 is based upon an estimate of our current year, 25-26 school year special education expenditures that we're not yet complete with. So that is something that we always will kind of watch and monitor and revise as necessary. And we do know and anticipate we will still continue to have a cross-subsidy need for special education where our true need for special ed is not necessarily being met by either federal or state combination. The referendum paragraph, this is just noting the fact that our current referendum is the 623.97 per adjusted pupil unit, and that is approximately $5.7 million. It does not include a CPI inflation factor at this time. Total, compared to our total general fund revenues, it's about 4%. The next page, on page 3, talks about the alternative teacher compensation, 2.2 mil. Compensatory talks about using a $1.4 million. We just had some information that came across of what occurred over the weekend with our legislators, and so I'm pleased to see that our number is right in the ballpark there as to what we're projected to see. So I feel good about that. The English learners, here's where we receive about $500,000, but we're spending about 3 times that, and so that's an area of cross subsidy that they've gone through some changes as to exactly how they want us to report that, but we'll be adjusting to that, and that is something I'm hoping to see them actually making some movement on, and hopefully see some additional revenue in that area. Enrollment, just a recap here of the enrollment over the past 5 years, or I should say since it's beginning in 26 and goes through fiscal year 31. Now in this case, this chart is a K-12 ADM comparison, different from what was noted up in number 3. So for revenue purposes, I need to include the early childhood, but oftentimes for K-12, you kind of want to look at that by itself. So that's what that table does for us. Moving on to page 4. Should keep this going too, sorry. We do have some revenue restrictions, and then we're listing those out here. So like operating capital, for example, and there's our budget is approximately $2.4 million, and then we have our long-term facilities maintenance revenue, talking a little bit about how now since 2016, 2017, this now also includes our health and safety, along with our deferred maintenance projects, our student transportation, knowing that revenue is really kind of baked into the gen ed formula and doesn't have its own restriction or anything, so it is a part of the unassigned. They basically say it's about $465 of our gen ed formula, or 4.65%, I think is what it is, of the gen ed formula is technically for transportation. I think in most cases people find that our expenditures exceed that amount. Our site-based budgeting, we did include or adjust for the Westwood Elementary building as a neighborhood school being closed and the relocation of Lola Del Lago when incorporating our instructional budgets. And yet, just to note that those instructional budgets are determined on a district-wide basis, and then they're distributed among various accounts and programs at the school building level. When we move on from there, now we're talking more about like food service and community education and debt redemption. Those are 3 other funds besides the general fund. The food service fund budget shows a slight increase to fund balance, estimated at about $103,408 for the 26-27. That's an increase to the fund balance. The community education or community service fund shows a planned spend down of about $520,860. They do have sufficient fund balance for that reduction. Community education does anticipate expanding their programming as we sell this building we're currently in as a district service center and join them at the new Educational Services Center at Greenwood. So they look to use some of those funds to basically prepare the space for their programming. Debt redemption. This is where all of our principal and interest payments go through. The levy dollars we receive from taxpayers goes into the fund, and all the payments come from that fund. Nothing else can go in there but that. So in summary, this was an attempt to basically just kind of run through this particular one-year budget, right? And what is it that were the assumptions? When you get to the middle of page 5, then we switch gears and we start talking now about what are the assumptions used in our 5-year projection. And so this is very similar to what you saw in a memo that came to you in February. Not much has changed with regard to those assumptions, although I did note that the 2% on an ongoing state aid formula basis It now isn't beginning 26, 27 because we use the actual 2.69% for that year. So I'm going to modify that to be 2027, 2028, because from there forward, I'm using 2%. It does have in the next paragraph, the voter approved referendum, currently at 623.97 per student, no inflation. So that is the amount that stays constant year to year. Now then we talk about 3 scenarios that have been created here. So this is all in Appendix 2, and it's tables A, B, and C. So the tables have shifted a little as to exactly what we're including based upon interest from the board as to what they'd like to see those numbers look like. And so as we take a look at those, these are full-page layouts for each of the tables. And we can talk more about them when we get to those, but basically the first one, Table A, is assuming our current voter-approved operating levy is renewed by the school board according to statute. And then Table B talks about assuming a new voter-approved revoke and replace operating levy is approved November of 2026 for $1,386 per adjusted pupil unit with inflationary factor. That is equivalent to that $32 per month conversation we've had. Appendix 2, Table C, is assuming a new voter-approved revoke and replace operating levy is approved November 2026 for $1,741 per APU with inflationary factor, and that's the $46 per month conversation. I would take note of the fact that our cross-subsidy, when it comes to revenues, when it comes to special education, we are still anticipating we're going to see about a $5 million each year of special education cross-subsidy. There is some increases, but then there's also this discussion of what's going to happen with the Blue Ribbon Committee. So still up in the air as to how that's all going to settle out in the next few years. When it comes to expenditures, the forecast is assuming a number of factors. And so under the expenditures section, the second paragraph kind of lays out that 2.5% for salary costs and 1 to 3% for services, supplies, and equipment. We're assuming that the district's dental insurance costs will increase 2 to 5% for all staff moving forward in the projection. Health insurance, we're assuming that uptick in that market trend is going to make us kind of stay at that 10% mark for the next 5 years. And there are some costs that are beyond the control of the district, like utilities, transportation, and maintenance capital, which make it about 12% of our district expenditures. So we have to kind of keep an eye on those and roll with what we need to there. Fortunately, there are some areas we can negotiate and have an agreement, but sometimes the need changes as well as we go from year to year. With regard to the enrollment projection, shows a slow and slight decline. Essentially, approximately 80, I'm at the top of the analysis now in the next paragraph, approximately 83% of our total expenditures are spent in salary and benefits. So just noting that. When talking about enrollment, we have a number of things that come into play. Enrollment is something that the hardest number to get, I think, is the kindergarten number, right? You just don't exactly know how many are gonna come through the doors. So what we do is we use the numbers from the county as to the birth rates, and we try and estimate exactly what percentage have we seen in trend over the last few years, and what are we going to anticipate seeing as we move forward. But there are some years in which that number may not come into play. We're starting to see a little bit of an uptick now in our enrollments for our kindergartners who are residents, and so that's a good thing. But we did lower that to 489, and that is included in the current year prepared budget for 26-27. And then beyond there, we did roll that forward then with lower numbers for the next few years. And so we do see that information is incorporated into the 5-year projections. Let's see. I do want to point out in the third paragraph down, it does state here on the last sentence there, even if a voter-approved referendum is renewed, there still needs to be a long-range plan for reductions to offset the decline in enrollment and therefore revenue which does not keep pace with expenditure needs. I bring this up because I've had that question as to why are you talking about having these reductions on an annual basis into the future when you're also asking for an operating levy and that's revenue coming to you. What you don't want is you don't want the public feeling like, we just gave you this money and now you're cutting because you already spent it. That's not the case. We know we're gonna have to reduce on an annual basis for the purpose of kind of staying in sync with our enrollment. So if enrollment's going up, maybe we won't be reducing as much, right? If it were to go down further than we anticipated, then we do need to make an adjustment, right? And so you're gonna just wanna kind of keep an eye on that, and on an annual basis, that is our mode of operation. You have expenditures there that are more in line with your enrollment. Let's see. The last paragraph is again more about the levy and the dollar amounts. Some of this is restatement, but just good to clarify and make sure we're all on the same page. On page 8, we've seen this graph before. This is just again noting the fact that the amounts that we see are the dotted lines, and that's what our formula allowance has been. And the solid line that is above is what if the number had been inflated or adjusted, I should say, for pupil weight change and inflation, what would that number be? And so it's that gap that is our concern for many districts in the state of Minnesota, because that gap means that we are missing out on revenue that we really need in order to address the expenditures that are going at that higher number, higher bar, or higher line graph, excuse me, compared to the revenue that we're receiving in the Gen Ed formula. So that continues to be a concern of ours and is included in the projections. The conclusion does state in here, I want to make note of, it talks about statutory operating debt, and I want to point out when we look at the next appendixes what that really means to us and what that looks like. Statutory operating debt is basically when you reach a point where your unreserved fund balance exceeds or does not exceed 2.5% of your operating expenditures. When you dip below that, that's when you're in statutory operating debt. Appendix 3 is my attempt to show the 3 referendum options, tables A, B, C, all together, and we'll walk through that in a moment. And so let's take a look at page 10. Because on page 10, we have a full page. This one here is table A, which is assuming our current referendum rolls forward. I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. Appendix 1, let's back up a moment. Appendix 1 is our estimated fund balance. This is the one that you want to take a look at for next year's budget and kind of understand where's our unassigned fund balance and what are all these things that we call restricted. So what we do is this one pager starts at the top with our unassigned. And that is essentially kind of like what's left after we do everything that's under the restricted, okay? So if I can move down to the B section, restricted for, this lists all of the items that are restricted by state statute for us to use the funds that we receive only for that purpose. And in some cases, we're gonna spend that amount. In other cases, we're gonna spend more than that amount. And so a good example of that might be taking a look at, say, where is it? Gifted Talented. You know, we receive $121,131 in revenue projected for next year, and we're going to spend $277,125 simply because of how we approach things. So that is an area where you're going to see in the transfer column the fact that we're basically pulling from above out of the unassigned to help cover that difference. Okay, can't have a negative fund balance on that, so you have to make sure you're balancing to zero. So that's what those numbers then mean in that column that says at the top here it states transfers into funds. And you'll notice that that column total of $377,984 ties to the transfers out of funds that you see at the top section A for the unassigned fund balances. The idea is as you bring in you have these starting fund balances from the audit, you bring in your revenues, you spend. What is the remaining fund balance? There's a couple of them that show negative on the READ Act, and they show negative simply because we anticipate that the dollar amount that we actually have available is gonna be the 120,000, simply because of what we don't think we're gonna spend this year, right? So we projected our revised budget that we would spend it all. The timing of that, of some of those expenditures are gonna fall into the next fiscal year, and that's where I'm just showing you what we have budgeted in the expenses. When it shows negative like that, we can't go negative, but it's gonna be because I anticipate we're actually gonna see dollars left after the current year, 26, okay? So that'll all iron itself out when we get the audit in here and you're doing, looking at this for revised. Okay, so all of the restricted funds, we figure that out. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that our totals match. So your total revenue you see at the bottom of the total general fund is 130,347,586. And our total expenditures is 129,877,401. That difference between those restricted numbers and that total flows up to the top, and that's what's in your unassigned, with a few exceptions to address some things like the cash or class size reduction. These are dollars we're setting aside for kind of those hot spots that you might think about. And then we have some carryovers for some assigned site carryover that needs to be maintained. And so you can see that anticipated fund balance isn't changing necessarily, but it is contractual for some employment agreements, so we need to maintain those. Bottom line, though, is 8.8% for all of these unassigned. The state does not consider the things that you see listed here as assigned as being restricted. So from their perspective, we're going to show an 8.8% unassigned fund balance with all these numbers if they were exactly like it says here. However, if you were to look at just what is the percentage on that top line, the top line alone is 8.46%. So what we consider our unassigned and what we focus on as to what's really truly available for everything else, that is that 10,989,161 or 8.46%. Fund balance policy says we will strive to have 8%, and that is what this budget is set up for us to do. The remainder of that page is the other funds, showing the revenues and expenditures along with beginning fund balances as anticipated. I'm going to move on to the next three under Appendix 2, tables A, B, and C. This is where we have the three scenarios that were mentioned. The first page here, again, is the current referendum continued forward, and that's where I have highlighted for myself the fact that the 27-28 fiscal year is the, as you take a look at the row that says unassigned fund balance near the bottom, just before the gray, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, where do I drop below the anticipated or strive to be at 8% fund balance, and that's going to be in the fiscal year of 27-28. Under this scenario, when do we have to worry about SOD? It is somewhere between that and the next year, okay? I am assuming the $3 million you see down here under the row that says net permanent adjustment to expenditures, still assuming that would be our target for assumptions for adjusting. Turning to the next table B, this one now shows with the revoke and replace at 1386 per APU, and this now shows us where it's 29-30 school year, in which case the percentage for fund balance drops below that 8%, and the SOD is going to be somewhere between that year and the following 2030-31. And our last example, table C, shows the revoke and replace with 1,741 per APU, and that then shows that we drop below the 8% in the year 2030-31. And that's as far out as my projections go. So Appendix 3 was my attempt to take those three charts and now visually try and show this to you with these things in play. So rolling through these charts here, getting to this graph, and talking a little bit about these colors. Let me see if I can make this bigger. There, I think that helps. Just get this up a little. Okay, So we have our red line. The red line is the 2.5% or statutory operating debt. We have our black line, which is our 8% minimum unassigned fund balance, and you see that it's not flat, it does increase slightly, ever so slightly, and that's because our expenditures are increasing each year. Our light blue line that is at the top there, that is the Table C, or $10 million additional funding at about $46 per month additional taxpayer impact. The purple line that is next is the $7 million of additional proceeds to the annual revenues. And that's about $32 per month to the taxpayer of an average home. Then you see the green line, which is our renew as is unassigned fund balance, which does sink a little bit quicker on the diagram. Trying to point out with the black line, you know, how and when does that all happen, and place this all on one sheet. So the last page of this memo talks about our enrollment, and this is in here so that people are aware of what was used for the kindergarten enrollments, 489 this year, or this next school year, excuse me, and the following year at 500, and then kind of staying right around that flat amount there forward. As I said, that's the toughest number to try and accumulate, and then this is using a 4-year weighted average projection model based on the numbers that we have. So that concludes all of 15 pages of first the memo about the next year's budget, and then the ongoing 5-year projection with those 3 possible scenarios. You've seen much of this information before, we've talked about a lot of it, but I'm happy to answer any of those questions you may have. I'll just point out that in the packet, there's also the revised, I see it now, it says revised, it should say adopted. The adopted budget resolution for the 26-27 year that you would anticipate seeing in June 8th for your approval. With that, I will pause.
Thank you so much, Director Ryder, for all of the detail and making it easy for us to walk with you through all the scenarios, so I really appreciate that. Board member discussion, questions? Maybe we'll start with you, Director Smith, this time.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for providing this. Very easy to follow. Just a couple of questions. On page 1 of the memo,
Yes.
you had mentioned that for secondary classes,
Yes.
they had said it was more like 34 was the average. Is that 25 to 34, or is that 34 full stop?
So they use, when they talk about secondary class size averages, they're focusing on the core
Yep.
courses, okay? So with the core courses, that's where they're saying, if you're really wanting to talk average, then the average is 34.
34 full stop?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
So
Thank
that's
you.
what will be modified.
Okay. On page 6 of the memo, I just wanted to make sure, is this a typo? The state of Minnesota providing aid at a rate of about 6%
Let me see.
on the second, or the.
Was providing aid, the cross-subsidy aid, it was providing it only at the rate of about 6%.
Okay, was it, okay, so it was
Right.
6%.
That
Okay.
has changed to 44 in
Yeah.
24, and then
Okay.
50% now in 25 and later.
Okay, great.
But that's what's up in the air as to what happens with the blue ribbon.
Right, of course, thank you. And then, this is more just kind of a looking down the runway kind of question. But the 10% increase annually, for health insurance.
Yes.
You keep adding, 10%. Similar to kind of the statutory operating debt conversation, is there a break point with that? And you talk about kind of the long-term planning, just kind of wondering, how long is that sustainable?
Right. We had a conversation this evening, earlier, prior to this meeting, was a health insurance meeting. And we really had conversations around that. And it's like, it was pointed out to me that you know, when you look back at the last 5 years, even though we are showing a 13% increase for next year, the average is less over the last 5 years than what many districts see, right?
Okay.
So, yes, we've done, you know, that's been good. The challenge now is really more around the market trend and what's happening outside of us.
Yep.
Right? And so with the cost of health insurance just skyrocketing all over, it makes it difficult to take a look at the 5-year and say, well, this is a onesie thing happening. You know, it's just gonna be 1 year and then we're gonna find ourselves going back to the way it used to be. I'd love to believe that. I'm just not certain I can because of the market trend being as it is.
Okay. So conversations are being had. and
Yes.
We're keeping an eye on it, but I was just kind of curious, what was
Active
that?
conversations, yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So you mentioned in the narrative that this correct me if I'm wrong, that this does not, your projections do not include a capital project levy?
No, they don't.
Being that that's part of the scenarios that we are considering, do you have any idea, or would you be able to comment on what that gets us for that SOD timeline, or is it still roughly the same, or is it?
So when you're talking about a capital project levy, that's gonna be the amount that is determined based on the rate, right? And what we've talked about has been that $3.8 million amount, because that's the amount that our debt service will drop in 2029 fiscal year. So if you align it to that, then it doesn't necessarily have an additional tax impact to our taxpayers. So if you use that number, that is a rate that's determined in the first year, and then that rate is applied from there forward. How might that help us here in the bigger picture? It will largely be around how are those funds planned to be used, right? And just hot off the presses is the fact that they have just approved the ability for school districts to code utility costs to operating capital.
Oh,
That's huge for us.
that's big news.
That's huge for us. So, that in itself could possibly alleviate quite a bit of expenditures that right now are coming out of the unassigned fund balance, right? And so, something to consider. A lot of people don't realize that school districts pay utility bills. Yes, we do. So, so that's, you know, I think it's about how are we planning to utilize this? We know we have a list of needs when it comes to curricular needs. We have a list of needs when it comes to operational needs. We have a list of the needs that are needed for our infrastructure, for our technology. And, you know, now it's about how and when would we need to do these things? And what would be possible if we actually have a question on the ballot? I think that's where we need to really get down to the nitty-gritty and start talking about that so it can be communicated,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So at that point in time, when we know that that's something that's gonna be on the ballot and that that's something we wanna move forward with, you would see an update from me with regard to what that would look like based on whatever the decision is for the ballot language.
Yeah, totally understand why it's
Yep.
not on there now. Was just kind of curious. And out of curiosity, utilities, what fund is that paid out of right now?
Utility costs comes out of the general fund.
Okay,
Primarily, because even utilities for child nutrition, unless you have a separate meter for the kitchens, they don't let you charge it to child nutrition. So primarily it's the general fund.
okay,
Yep.
great, thank you. Let's see here. And I'm sorry, I might have missed it on your, on page 15 of the memo, appendix 1. The difference transfers into funds, transfers out of funds. What's the distinction there between those two columns?
Sure. So in the case where it's transferred into funds, it's a case where you have expenditures that exceed the revenues. And so where's the money coming from?
Sure.
It's gonna come from the unassigned dollars. The dollars that aren't required to be spent in a particular area, but you do need them down here in the area of, say, gifted and talented in order to cover those costs.
Right.
It's my belief that you should show the expenditures in the areas that you're actually spending it, even if it means that you're essentially subsidizing from the unassigned, right? So you'll see the transfers into the funds under the restricted areas, and it's coming out of the unassigned at the top.
Okay, so the only number that you'll see in the transfers out of funds is that top number, right? Okay, great, thank you. I think I had one last question. Yeah, for Appendix 2C, the 5-year projection with the 1741 per pupil. You know, just like in the other two, you had mentioned that statutory operating debt occurs either that year we dip below 8% or the year after. Is it safe to assume that in this scenario, that statutory operating debt happens in 31, 32, or is that maybe,
We'll be close.
we'll be close?
But we
Okay.
might squeeze it out another year.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you so much, this is great.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Director France?
Thank you. When I look at, you know, our financial situation, the 5-year projection, basically, we have 3 choices. We can tread water for a year and then drown. We can tread water for 2.5, 3 years and then drown, and then we tread water for a little over 4 years, and then we start drowning. So that, I think that needs to be pointed out pretty strongly here with our choices. The other thing that I'm a little worried about is that rate of our ability to do that, given the estimate for the CPI, which was, you estimate that and continuously over the 5-year projection at 4%?
Do you mean
The
inflationary
Yes,
rate?
the inflationary
Only
rate.
2% was used.
Oh, I thought you said a CPI of 4% when I was looking through here. I gotta find it.
I'll have to look to see. It's not intended to be. It's a 2% that's out there under the state assumptions. And if you look at the Ellers materials, you'll see in a little bit, you're gonna see that those inflationary numbers are at the 2.02, 2. So that's my intention, is to use a 2% increase on those.
Is that realistic?
For the let me see if we're talking about the same thing. I'm talking 2% on the inflationary for the referendum.
No, I was talking about the CPI you used in your 5-year
Oh,
projection for the
yes,
budget.
on average,
That
it's
was the
4 to
4%.
5% each
Okay.
year for the expenditure increases,
Okay,
yes.
yes.
Yes, without anything done for adjustments, yeah.
And the current estimate is between 4 and 6%, I believe, in the industry if things don't change.
Yep.
So what will that do if we see the CPI increase above that 5% rate? I mean, I know that affects primarily goods and services, purchased goods and services, but that's still a huge chunk.
Yeah, it's very challenging because as we start seeing even some of our invoices for next year that are coming through now, even though we can't pay them until July 1, the reality is that what we're experiencing for increase in costs, other vendors are also experiencing, and, you know, you just get this memo that basically says, heads up, your invoice when you get it this year is gonna be inflated for costs that we have to push along, and we don't know exactly what that looks like until we get the invoice, right? So that's a challenge for us because the impact of what's going on across the world now and how that's really gonna impact our vendors, how it's gonna then flow through to us, that is something we're gonna have to kind of watch closely to see whether these percentages that I've used in these assumptions are gonna stand for us, or do we have to adjust, right? So this is something you're gonna see on an annual basis so that we can continually review it and see whether or not this is still holding true. The other area I would say that is somewhat much more of an estimate, as always has been discussed, is our special education revenue, right? You know, so wanting to make sure that I don't overestimate that, because that is an area the state's struggling to keep up with, right? So whether or not they can actually fulfill us with the amounts that we anticipate we should get based on our expenditures is the real question. So that's an area that has been adjusted here ever slightly each year, even though our costs are projected to go up at 2.5% at least. Yep.
Director Olson, any questions?
Sorry, yes, just a few. Food service on page 5 of the memo, the slight increase, what is that due to? Is that going back on the national program at the high school, maybe?
I mean, part of it's that, but it's really about the funding that is coming into Fund 2 because of the meals being free from from the state. It's interesting because that kind of is a shift for us in the fact that the state's having to cover more than what used to be in the past, more federal dollars. So we're seeing that happen in the food and nutrition, child nutrition area. I think that the free and reduced applications, the educational benefits for free and reduced meals, that is something that we still should and would want to encourage our families that are eligible to continue to fill out. If nothing else, it certainly shifts that, that cost, the revenue that we receive to the federal versus the state where it's appropriate. But the other thing that it will do is allow for other things that are still based upon those percentages, like our E-rate, our title allocations, other federal programs that look to what is it that is free reduced eligibility versus just the direct cert, which is what is otherwise used by the state now for compensatory aid. So I think that that's a challenge for us with regard to what's causing the increase. This is a fund that has been closely monitored and has pretty well stayed fairly close to that. I mean, they have gained quite a bit of a fund balance during the COVID years, which was the case across a number of districts. You'll note, though, that there is a fund balance requirement that you cannot have too much fund balance, or you have to have a plan, right? So that is 6 months out, still through 26, 27. And then if we still have a fund balance that exceeds that 3 months out, then we'd have to have a plan as to how that's going to be spent down. But I think that that's something that is costs of food and other things that we experienced in this year and into this next year. You know, we'll talk more about what that looks like for us as far as whether we need a plan or not, because I have a feeling it's just gonna kind of eke away at what we have. So our estimate at this point in time, though, is there is a slight benefit to the fund balance.
Okay. I realize this next question kind of depends on the district, and it's very much not a clean-cut answer, probably. I'm gonna ask it anyway. How, on average, how often do districts go to voters for a levy? On average?
Yeah,
Again,
so
I know it's,
others might be able to better answer that one, but I would say that that's shifted over the years. I can remember years in which going every 10 years was sufficient and it worked fine. But with the increase in costs and particularly health insurance over the years and the contract requirements and things of that nature and the unfunded mandates that have just hit us hard, particularly in the last 5 to 7 years, I mean, I'd say that's just changed the game, right? So I don't know that I could necessarily say on average what that looks like, and other than a guess, right? But I can say with confidence that it is less than the 10-year mark as it used to be.
you know, I bring that up, thank you, and I know I caught you off guard with that question, and I appreciate your candor. Page 14 was kind of the big flag for me, to put that visually, and thank you for doing that. You know, you can read this stuff and then you're presented this information and you see things differently. It's crazy to me. And I guess is why I voted to see whatever the $60 amount was. And the reason I asked that question is, we went for a vote 2 years ago. And then before that, it was what was the tech levy? My years are running together. 20, yeah. It was after COVID. So we're kind of on a every 2 to 3 year kind of thing right now. But this was eye-opening to me to see basically with whatever option in another, it goes by a year where you're kind of inching closer to that standard, that SOD, thank you, standard statutory. So I guess my comment with all of this is I have trouble going to our community saying, you know, this $32 a month, and say we do and it passes, that's great. And yes, we passed a levy, but it's not gonna do anything. And not to what we want, and the same could be for 46. So I guess, you know, I liked your analogy, treading water and then drowning. And I want to be real with our community that yes, if we go for 32 and it passes, that's great. But it's just not enough. And I don't want to be in this situation in another year and another year and another year where we try every year, every 2 years, just to stay afloat. And so that's just kind of where I am with, especially seeing that chart that you did on 14. It was really eye-opening to see, where we would be. And nobody wakes up in the morning and go, God, I hope my taxes go up. Nobody says that. And I understand. But I'm just trying to be real. And I know in our survey, we said, this potentially comes with cuts. This potentially still comes with cuts. This potentially still comes with cuts. And I know we were open about that. This was really eye-opening for me. So thank you for pulling it together and for all the work with this memo and all of the charts. It's really, 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 it's easy to follow. It's easy to read. It's understandable, which we need. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Director Mason?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all of this. It's a lot to digest. I had the same question, I think, first as Director Smith around adding the capital levy to the graph, and maybe that's great if we want to wait till after that decision's made. And even just with like some assumptions, right? Are we gonna spend X dollars of it towards freeing up operating versus new investments, whatever.
Right.
So whatever we decide, I think that would be helpful at some point. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, knowing we'd be making some assumptions on what we're gonna do with the dollars, but, and then I think last year we got like a detailed budget, like the big spreadsheet. Do you have that handy you could send to us separately? Just to see some of the like comparisons of like what we're spending on curriculum or, all the things that are in the expenditures to compare to prior years?
Okay, so I understood that sheet was more about the restricted funds, but I think what I'm hearing you say is the breakdown of the unassigned possibly?
Yeah, I mean, it was a full breakdown, and it might have been originally from Finance Committee, but it was that massive
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
I'm aware of the
whole-
spreadsheet you're talking
yeah.
about. We looked at
Revenue
this
and expenses.
one pager on page 10 as being its replacement.
Okay,
So I guess if there's something that you're feeling isn't present here, then that's what I can further understand. This has, like, my recollection is that you had one side of the sheet, it was a very long sheet, right? And one side of it was the revenues.
Yep.
And the other side was the expenditures. And so you'd have a column for, say, student activities.
Yep.
A column for ALC, staff development and such, on both sides.
Yep.
And totals at the bottom, and lines across like where they all landed and such. So, I mean, I feel as though this is a little bit more concise with pulling the information right here in front of you where you have the revenues and you have the expenditures. But it is true, it doesn't get into the breakdown of the unassigned.
yeah.
So, that is something that this doesn't cover. So maybe that's something we can discuss as to what exactly is missing. And I can go back and double check to see what was like shown there and what isn't shown here.
Yeah.
I have to say, I didn't check that more recently. I just went with the assumption that this actually covered it, so.
Yeah, I personally, I liked it, the way it broke everything down and sliced it and diced it between revenues, expenditures, and the different buckets across both ways. So I would love it if you have it in the same format. I don't want to create a bunch of
It wasn't
work, but-
created, so we'd have to work
Okay.
at that. What's that?
Right, that's not something that we have
It is not something we have at this time.
currently. That was a one-time run that previous director did. So if that's the will of the board, that's work that our team could.
Well, and I think I would ask specifically if there was something specific that
Yeah,
you
I mean, it
aren't
just broke
seeing
things
here?
down a lot better and to see how much we're spending on, curriculum, special, it broke it way down way better. Again, we had kind of dove into it more in this finance committee meeting before, but I know we didn't do that this year, so I was just curious if it existed.
Yeah, well, and I think, I appreciate the ask, and I think just for the administration, just given all of the current workload, and it's not something that is created, we'd have to figure out if it is the will of the board to recreate something like that. And so if there's something specific that maybe you and Director Ryder can discuss
I can
offline,
ask, yep.
that would maybe suffice. If it's more like the board as a whole is looking for a past document, I could take a consensus down the road to see if that's the thing. But if it's something that maybe could just be,
That's fine.
okay, sounds good.
And then just, I think, kind of hopping between forecast and current year, but on the 5-year forecast, the one that went up like 10% a year, I think, was the fiscal and fixed costs. Why is that, I don't know if I missed it and it was stated, but like, why is that a jump over the 5 years?
One more time, which table?
Sorry, all of them. I mean, any of the forecasts, the fiscal and fixed costs increases. That's like a 10%-ish increase year over year?
Yeah, so that's the leases that we have. So these are leases that are not under your debt service fund. These are things like, do a 4-year lease for the devices that we have. And so as we just did the, I guess, Mac Airs, if I got that right, for the teachers, for example, that's something then that we're going to see that increase, the need for those particular leases increase over the years with the interest and the fact that there's added ones to it on an ongoing basis because they're kind of staggered.
Okay.
We have copiers, for example, coming up next year. So that'll be one year that we have to see what happens with those. And we have to do an RFP or find a state contract that we're under. So that's increasing at a standard percentage just to kind of make sure we got it covered.
Okay, thank you, that makes sense. And then, again, I know we kind of did this approach last year of like comparing to the prior forecast. So the forecast that we used 4 months ago as the basis for our cuts, right, showed expenditures at like 132 million. We're now at like 129.9. So certainly see the savings, but then I think there were a couple areas that were a pretty big jump. So special ed specifically, I think we raised nearly 1.7 million from 4 months ago. What is the reasoning behind that? Like, did we see a spike in kids over
Negotiated
the last 4
contract
months, or?
that wasn't included previously, other than a flat amount, right?
Sorry,
But
what? For-
the negotiated teacher contract, remember the first year was this year?
But only in special education that it
No,
impacted?
it's just that's where a good number of our instructors are, and particularly those that are at that point in the schedule that received the increases and the longevities and such. So
I thought we had already talked about that being in budget.
it is
whatever.
it is for 27 and beyond, and we always had that in there, but it's the 26 year. Like, when we talked about the teacher contract, the fact of the matter is that the 26 year, current year,
Yeah,
had an established budget that didn't necessarily account for the full amount of what we were probably going to need, particularly when it came to, like, say, the insurances or the special, or the total cost of salaries. Now, it's not much, but it's some, but that is some of it. As far as where else, we have contracted services, because we can't fill some of these positions, and those contracts are going up. I think that although our enrollment overall is going down, our enrollment for special education needs is not.
I
That is a
certainly
shift.
understand that.
Yep.
Yeah, I just know, again, from 4 months ago when we started versus today, the 1.7, that struck me as, like, that was a big
Yep.
bucket. And the rest of it, I think we see the reflection of the cuts right
Yep.
across the staff.
Yep.
So that's good. I didn't know if there was something like specific
Nothing
that
else.
came up or.
Nothing else necessarily, although I will say that, you know, the process used here is one that has quite a bit of manual review done by Andrea in the process of getting these broken down by the various different department program areas. And so I feel like this is probably more accurate than what may have been kind of just across the board last time, you know, in February for this year as well as the future. So getting the current year 26 kind of understood as to what are our current costs for all these people, and then seeing that then projected as to what their salaries will be for next year, and now importing that into our system for 27 and then beyond, using the percentages as we talked about. I didn't change those percentages, except I did lower the health insurance from 13 down to the 10.
Okay. And then I think the other two buckets that we saw increases were like 188,000 in in district support services, and then 185 in the, I think, sites and buildings. Is there any reason?
What 2 years are you comparing?
Just again, from 4 months ago to now,
But what year?
for this year.
For the
this-
current year?
For the budget, as we're budgeting for 26, 27.
Oh, 26, 27, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just, it's solely based off from, trying to think here, I suppose it's based off from more accurate information as to who has health insurance and what coverage do they have. That shifts and changes. So I'm not sure, there was nothing other particular, there were no positions added, only positions reduced.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I was wondering. Okay. Yeah, I mean, really, so we've really increased the budget, like 1.7 million. If we took the forecast from 4 months ago, minus the cuts, and then added 1.7 back to
I
it.
think you see that on the revenue though, too.
Of course, yes.
Yep.
But I
Yep.
mean, revenue doesn't mean more expenses always, right? It just. Okay, and then, sorry. Buildings. Oh, the 2.4 million from sale of DSC, are there specific things that we're spending that on, or is it just kind
Yeah.
of embedded throughout?
There's some plan on that. As you know, there's an equipment and, how do I want to say this? Equipment and finance lease, I believe it's called. And there's 2 years left on it. So it's this year 26 and next year 27. And so it's about $700,000 that in the past has been taken from the unassigned. Okay? And we've talked about this. Instead, we're going to cover that out of the capital in 27, and then one more year in 28. There we go. So that's 700 each year. That's about 1.4 mil. There is 450,000 in the budget for use towards modifications at Greenwood for staff in this building. This is separate from what community education might be doing, separate from the transitions program, that is special education. And then the rest is still unmarked. It's available for curriculum needs or other needs as we determine that would have to be capital in nature, of course.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's most of my questions. I think, you know, again, I know we've talked about this before with the forecast, but I think certainly looking at enrollment, for example, if we're dropping 500 students over the next 5 years, we would be looking to do, you know, other shifts, I think, to save expenditures to align with that enrollment. And then, you know, again, I go back to like just the forecast that we saw in October 2025, right before I joined the board, or October 2024, sorry. We had, I mean, we've essentially grown the expenses for this year that compared to that forecast, like $10 million. If you take the amount that we had then plus all the cuts we made, $8.4 million worth of cuts over the last 2 years, and then the additional 1.7. So, I mean, that's a massive increase in expenses, I guess, and I know that there's a lot of reasons, but I think it's important for our community to know that, like, the expenses are going up astronomically. So, and I think our revenues are pretty in line with that, so that's great, but. I think that was it. Thank you.
Director Atkinson?
Do you want me to go? Oh, I'm sorry. Or do you want Director Johnson to go?
Can you hear us, Director Johnson?
I'm happy to go and then let him feed in, or whatever he wants to do.
Can you hear us?
Welcome.
No problem. You guys just fine. Can you hear me? Yep, we can hear you. Do you know where we are on the agenda, Director Johnson?
I think I figured it out, but
Yep, we are under the preliminary budget review and those documents. And so we're on Director Atkinson for questions. And then after her, if you have any that, from your review of the packet, we'll let you go last.
sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. Thank you for going through all this, putting it together and going through it in detail. It was incredibly helpful. I have several questions and then a few comments. The first question I have, you mentioned our English learner aid. You said that it's about 3 times more than what we received, the $500,000.
Right.
Given we have about 385 students per MDE, are you including, when you say the English learner aid doesn't, our need is 3 times greater than that, are you including any of the, like, the Ola Delaga programs or anything like that? Or are you just specifically referring to the 385 students?
Right, so many districts, including ourselves, have utilized the compensatory aid as a means to cover the costs of our English learners. And so that's always been an allowable expenditure, continues to be an allowable expenditure. What's shifting on us is the fact that the legislature wants to know and see it differently. And so that means I'm shifting those expenses from compensatory over to the 339 finance, which is just EL. And as you do that, I mean, they've always seen it where you can look at the program code and see it's program 219, that's definitely EL. But regardless, the point is they're trying to get a handle on exactly how much is cross-subsidy. And what we learned is, what we kept hearing before is, if you're getting $500,000 of revenue, then move $500,000 of expenditures over there. And consider maybe not spending it to a negative balance, but, get it close. So we did that, but we left the rest over in 317 compensatory. Now we're hearing, if you want 25% of the expenditures that exceed the revenue you're getting, you need to put it all over into the 339. And so in that process, it's kind of highlighting the fact that our expenditures are $1.5 million. They're not, 500,000, which we've always known and it's always been the case, but we've utilized that compensatory to cover those costs. So now as we move forward, it's like those other, we're gonna, basically we wanna be able to see that separately and also see the revenue that comes from it, right? So we wanna benefit from the 25% of those expenditures that we know we're spending above and beyond the revenue. So let's make sure we code that so that moving forward, we're seeing that. So that's one of the big things that's coming up, and I guess the fact that that is just kind of called out, I think, is mostly because of the attention it's getting at the state level, and the need has always been, it's on a case-by-case basis, right, for students. So the counts that we have tend to be around the same. With students coming in and then leaving, there's also a requirement that they have to have services for so many years, but when they exceed the number of years, then you don't get funding for it. But you will continue to serve those students to the need that they have. So that's partly why you see expenditures that exceed those revenues, right? Because the law is the way it is, and you don't receive funding once you get past a certain number of years. Does that help?
Yeah, totally helpful. But it's not funding any of the Ola Delago? That's not
No,
considered
not at
an
all.
English learner?
No,
Okay.
it is not.
I just wanted to make sure, because like I said, our student count for English learner is 385 students or so.
Yep.
Okay, then my second question, and I think I've brought this up in the past with the revenue assumptions. I'm gonna pause and go back to the special education. So first of all, does your forecast align with the revenue projector provided by MDE? Like, comparing those to what you have in here, does it align with what MDE is saying that we're gonna get from a revenue standpoint?
For 26, 27, it is shy by about $1 million. Okay? Because it's
Our
projection.
forecast is show?
Our forecast amount for 26, 27 is shy from the calculation that's currently out there on MDE's website by about $1 million. And why is because I don't know what's gonna happen with the cross-subsidy. Of that amount of dollars we receive, a significant portion is from this cross-subsidy aid. And so our costs are increasing. We're also looking at, as part of this transition of moving EL out, special education funds are eligible under compensatory. So do you slide some of that over and keep your maintenance of effort? I'm getting too detailed here probably for the general public, but it's a balancing act that you play. And so the fact is, if we have to actually kind of, I'll say, tamper our expenditures for special education so that it doesn't necessarily increase too high, and then now that's the new maintenance of effort that you have to maintain for the following years, you can potentially code some of those things over to compensatory and kind of keep that a little bit flatter, but you have to acknowledge you're going to lose the 75 cents per dollar on the special education if you do that. So it's kind of like, we have to just kind of walk that line. Because you can't afford to keep the maintenance of effort up there too high, but at the same time, balancing it.
But wouldn't with special ed, because it's paid in arrears, wouldn't you pretty much know what you're getting since you've already incurred those expenses in the past?
Well, 1 year, so we're still incurring the cost this year, so
Right.
the final salaries and everything, that's in our projection, right? So where our budget is, we're assuming is gonna carry forward. The challenge is also how are they gonna fund it? Because they've already said they're gonna reduce the amount that's being funded for transportation special ed, right, by 5%. And so then the question is, what's gonna happen with the $250 million statewide? If that isn't something that they can come up with, then it's gonna come out of that special ed aid that they're otherwise giving us in cross-subsidy. So, others in my position across the districts in the state are cautious.
Yeah, so that
And
makes sense. I mean,
I'm conservative.
yeah, so can you also help me understand, when I'm looking at that SPED revenue in that revenue calculator, it looks like the SPED revenue for our district from 2023 to current, we've increased about $10 million. So we've seen a huge increase in SPED, and which is why we got the additional money this year. It looks like we're gonna get the, additional money next year for SPED
Yeah.
from their revenue, their projection. Can you help me understand why there's been such a huge increase?
So pay attention on that revenue spreadsheet because there's two subtotals. There's a subtotal that is before the cross-subsidy and then after. If you look at the amount that's before the cross-subsidy, that's not increasing very much. But in the last 2 years, the cross-subsidy has significantly increased. So that's the bulk of the reason why you see that much of an increase. And yet it's kind of in arrears too, right? So we also experienced some transportation costs that were higher in '25 compared to '24, as we know. Not just transportation, but just special ed in general, right? So that was also a significant jump for us. Our costs in special ed overall, because there's a tab for revenue and there's a tab for expenditures.
No,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
yeah, it's very helpful, actually. So I think, like I had called out before, I think the revenue calculation on here for the 5-year is probably a little bit conservative, where in the past, our compounded revenue has been trending around 4.4%. And so I think that overall impacts our entire, it impacts the entire forecast, basically. The other thing is, I did have a question, Director Mason touched on it, with the building sale of 2.4 million. So are those expenditures all included in the 26-27 year, or are they spread out throughout multiple years?
So one of the 700,000 is in year 27, the
Okay.
other is in 28. And then the 450,000 is bookmarked for 27. Otherwise, the unknown is what you will see in the operating capital line. You see it increasing from 45,000 up to the 1.4. So that's the 700 and the other remaining 500 to 600,000, so.
Okay, thank you. And then just like simple math, looking at our budget from 25 to 26, our expenditures are 126 million. We're estimated to be at 129 million. I myself look at that and go, you know, shouldn't that be closer to 4 million? You know what I mean, as far 4 million in reductions. It should be 4 million in reductions from where we were last year. If we're budgeting year over year compared to last year, that number should be in a reduction of 4 million.
If everything stayed stable, but our positions and salaries have not, so.
Right, no, I understand, and I think that's where we get into, and I've talked about this before, and where we get into some trouble is this budgeting year over year over year, and of how we budget. But, I mean, I think, you know, there's been some chatter at the board tonight, or some discussion at the board tonight about treading water and drowning, and I think the one thing that we learned this year is that we have a superintendent who had it written in his goals to bring a budget that operated with the fund balance at 8%. And we see that, right? And our district is in a good financial position because of that. I think when you look at my past 3 years on the board, and I cautioned every single year about this and got a lot of criticism about it from other board directors. When we don't operate within our board policy of providing a balanced budget, that's when we have trouble. That's when we're gonna drown. And I think if one thing we learned this year is we learned how to swim. And that's great, because we learned how to operate within a balanced budget. And I think that what I would like to see in a 5-year projection is I would like to see, if we were to continue to operate, if it was the will of the board, because there was a more conservative, fiscally conservative board majority last year that said, you know, we would like to see a balanced budget. Our superintendent, it was written in his goals, it was in our board budget priorities. If we were to continue to operate on a balanced budget, what would this forecast look like for the next 5 years? And that's something that I would like to see, because that's not what we're seeing right here. We're basically saying, we're gonna continue to overspend. And I think,
I'm sorry, what?
Where does it show that we're overspending?
our
help-
revenues, our expenditures are exceeding revenues. And so, if we were to operate where our expenditures were in line with our revenues, just like our board budget policies, I think our financial situation would look different. And we hear a lot of talk about how we're gonna have to continue to make cuts. If we don't have the students, I mean, just looking at the 500 students, if you take that times $11,000, that's $5.5 million we're gonna lose in the next 5 years, that we don't have the revenue. So I think it's important for people to understand at the board table and in our community that a big part of this revenue issue is because of our loss of students. So I think that's important. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I have more to add, but I think that's my biggest takeaway is, I think if we, like I said, we continue to operate within our board budget policies, we haven't in the past, and you can go back and look through the finance reports where we've overspent anywhere between 2.8 million and $7 million, and that's why we've gotten into trouble in the past. So happy to see our budget come in where it's coming in, where we are meeting our board policies, and like I said, I'm happy to see that, so thank you.
Director Johnson, you have any questions or on the presentation for Director Ryder? She'd be happy to take them.
Yes, just one area. Mine's really around the enrollment. I know that it's constantly changing. We talk a lot about next year, and anticipating a lot of our, in-district families to wait until the summer. But just trying to remember back to what we saw, a few weeks ago, it was a significant number, and I don't remember, I apologize, I had it written down, for what we were missing coming into this year. or what hasn't been enrolled for going into next school year. With that, my question is, how much of a change or how big of a change do you foresee us having to make into next year if the enrollment stays with the current projection that you have?
If enrollment for kindergarten comes in at the 489, that is what the budget is built upon. If we find that our kindergarten enrollment is less than that, we would be looking at whether or not there's a section that should be reduced at one of our sites. And if that's even possible, we'd have to take a look at that, right? But aside from that, it's something that you likely are going to find included in the budget on page, it's best shown probably on page 10. You can see that there is a set aside of $200,000 for class size reduction. And one of the areas that we're kind of watching closely is that kindergarten. And so should we need an extra position there that isn't really justified by the student counts? In other words, we've allocated enough sections for 489 students and we come short of that by say, we're at 468 or something like that instead. That will then mean that you will probably have smaller classes across the district in kindergarten. And how are we going to pay for it? It's going to come from this class size reduction hotspot type area that we have set aside in the budget. Is that answering your question? I'm not sure. Did I miss it?
Director Johnson, can you hear us? I think you're frozen.
I got most of that.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, it's raining really hard here. I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Director Johnson, just before you signed on, we were also tracking that some of that resident kindergarten enrollment, that was what we were missing. That's what we're starting to see, some small trends of that starting to increase.
Okay, thank you for the context.
Yep.
All right, well, I think if there's no other comments on that portion, we'll move forward to the sample ballot questions. Ellers and Associates has prepared some options, including estimated taxpayer impacts and timeline considerations. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Tom, or Director Ryder?
Ryder.
Director Ryder?
Thank you. Let's see, I think this is the best.
You need a break. Do you want a break? Can we take a quick break? We'll take a quick break before.
We're at 2 hours.
Yeah, we can take a quick break. We'll take a 5-minute recess if you don't mind.
Okay.
And then we'll come back so nobody misses anything.
Click on the slideshow, I think. I don't really know. Where is it? I thought that's where it was. Is it this one maybe?
The graph.
Like Murphy's Law. It was so dry.
You got the thumbs up from Liz. All right, we're gonna start back up and with our Ellers presentation. Thank you so much for joining us again this evening. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Matthew Hammer from Ellers. We do have some information tonight based on feedback we received and some information that the district asked us to run for tonight. So that we have, it's an update of the information we would have seen back in April. The numbers haven't changed and the estimates haven't changed, but we've got some more specific information on some specific options. So I'll just get into the presentation of information and then we can answer any questions as we get through here. See if I can figure out how to run this. Here we go. So one of the key considerations that districts, as they're thinking about presenting questions to voters, is whether we add an inflationary adjustment. And I just want to go back to some of this information that we talked about at the end of April. Those questions for the large majority of districts, they're presenting these questions right now with that operating or that inflationary factor as part of the question. And if we look just specifically at the 7-county metro area since 2018, there's been 57 operating questions that asked for an increase. 49 of those included an inflationary adjustment. 37 of those passed, 12 failed, and 8 did not. And those had a 50-50 outcome in the 8 questions that didn't have an inflationary adjustment. That language, as we'll see as part of the ballot options, is called out in one line in the ballot. And we'll see how that gets laid out in one of the options that we, as we go forward, we'll have it underlined as part of the question. And that's the component of the question that either stays or goes, right, depending on what the district would want to do. The inflationary adjustment, I think this is key, right? The district doesn't decide what that number is. The state of Minnesota decides what that number is, and it's the exact same formula that's used to calculate the statutory cap in the operating formula. So the operating referendum cap is for fiscal, this next year is about $2,400 in total. I think it's 2,398 right now is the latest estimate. The state adjusts that cap every year with a formula, and that formula is the same formula that's used if a district has an inflationary adjustment in the question. So they just apply the same formula to the authority that those districts have. Districts can have authorities that have inflation and don't have inflation as well. So it's an option for districts to have both an inflationary adjusted formula and one that isn't. You can have multiple authorities. As we look at the options that we've presented, or we were asked to run, this is a revoke of the existing operating referendum the district has. The district's current authority is $623.97. That authorization in this case would be $32 per month. The authority would go from $623.97 to $1,385.97 per pupil. This is assuming a 10-year period. That's the maximum term that you can have on an operating referendum or a capital project levy. We do have an option in here that we'll talk about as we go forward. The maximum term for either type of levy is 10 years. And then you'll see that sentence, which we've underlined as we go forward, is this is increase each year by the rate of inflation beginning with taxes payable 28. So the authority would be reset for taxes payable 27. If the election was presented in November for next tax year, that authority would go to $1,385.97, and then in this case would be subject to an increase of the rate of inflation starting with taxes payable 28 and beyond. So this is the tax impact estimate. Right now, your average value home's right around $525,000 for a residential home in the school district. We're looking at an estimated tax increase of $377, or not quite $32 per month. This run right here would generate right around approximately $7 million of revenue that would start with fiscal year '28. I think that's an important consideration. You can see we're on a one-year delay, so if the taxes and the levies passed, the first tax year would be taxes payable '27. The first revenue year the district would get revenue would be fiscal '27, '28, or July 1 and '27 would be that start of revenue. This is a look at the option that comes with a $46 per month tax impact. The first part of this question looks identical. There's no change. Both these options are looking at a revoke and replace of the existing authority. The new authority in this case would go from $623.97 to $1,740.97. And then we're highlighting that sentence that is in play if the district would subject to the authority to a rate of inflation. So that's that sentence right there is the sentence that in the ballot that makes the authority subject to inflation. That sentence would go away if inflation was not part of the equation. This estimate at $46 a month, we'd be looking at a tax increase of about $552 on top of what you're already paying for the referendum as part of your tax levy. And that would generate about $10,250,000, $262,000 is what we're estimating based on the enrollment forecast that the district's using. The increase would be a net of $1,117 above the current authority. So those are the two operating referendum scenarios that we were asked to run. The other thing that we've been looking at is the capital project levy. A lot of districts refer to this as their technology levy. If you're in the metro area, it's often referred to as a technology levy in some districts. We're looking at, this is the Dr. Ryder, or not Lisa, Director Ryder, was looking at a $3.8 million reduction that she referred to in our debt service levy. So that's a scheduled reduction that is planned as part of the district's debt service levy. That would be taxes payable '28, fiscal '29. That represents about a $3.8 million reduction that's going to be scheduled in the overall taxes the district property owners are paying. That's about $17 per month is the estimate of what that decrease is. When we look at that, if we fill that space in with a capital project levy, which is spread on the same tax base and that tax capacity, we'd be looking at a tax increase that's not above the current level of what property owners would be paying for that part of your tax levy. What that looks like is if we presented a two-question ballot, if the district did, what we're showing here is the $32 a month on an average home at $377 increase for question one. Question two then would have no additional increase above what the current levels that property owners are paying. So that represents that estimated amount is $196. So that reduction or $17 a month represents $196 annually. You fill that in with the capital project levy in '28 with a one-year delay. There's no increase on the net change for taxes payable '28. So question one impacts the tax levy right away in '27. Question two would have a one-year delay impacting the tax levy with that scheduled debt service drop in taxes payable '28. So the net increase in revenue here is, in this scenario, is still that roughly almost 11 million in this case. What does that look like in a question? This question is showing, and we're actually not showing it in this example right here, but we'll show it to you in the examples that we have. You can make the second question contingent on the first. And we'll show you how that plays out in the ballot language. But this is an example where this question would stand on its own. The tax, we did take another run at how the ballot question could read. In this case, the estimated tax rate that would be applied to generate 3.8 million based on what we're forecasting for the tax base would be 3.427%. And that is taken by the overall net tax capacity of the school district. So as your tax base would grow or decline over time, because both can happen, right? We've seen both. The amount of revenue generated by this tax levy would change each year. So it would start with a levy of 3.8 million with taxes payable in '28 in this example. And then as your tax base changes over time, that tax rate is applied to your overall net tax capacity. And that's the revenue amount you would receive in that year. I will say that as your tax base is changing up and down, the amount of, and we'll see it on the tax impact, that amount does not change on a home value very much, right? Because as your assessed values are changing, you're taking that percentage times that value. The overall tax impact, as we look at these types of levies over a 10-year period, are going to stay pretty in line with what the amount was that was estimated for the ballot when they were originally put into place. This example shows a non-contingent question. We'll show you an example where you would have a contingent question as well. And really what ends up happening is it'll say right here, this question can only pass if question 1 passes. And we'll show you an example of that as we move forward here. There's some timeline considerations. Your statutory timeline requirements are August 11th for calling for an election for operating referendum. Based on the ballot question as presented in the capital project levy, there would be a review and comment requirement, because if you spend $1 outside of technology, the state of Minnesota has a review and comment that's required by law. That kicks into play, and you need to give the state of Minnesota 60 days to approve that review and comment back. And we've got a June 30th deadline for that if that second question would be considered. That allows MDE their 60-day period, and as part of the ballot question, you actually need to say that the department provided a positive review, and with early voting, that is early in September, mid-September, right? So if we're going to give that 60 days, you got to have that submitted by the end of June. We've discussed the June meeting as being the target date for the consideration of the election documents and necessary resolutions if they were going to, if the district's going to move forward with the question. Election date would be November 3rd, 2026. I'm going to show you in a little bit bigger format here the layout of these different options. And give me 1 second to see if I can get these on the screen in a little bit better format. So the two options, this is an exact draft of what the ballots would look like. Option 1 in this case is the $32 per month change. $1,385.97 would be the amount that the authority would go to, starting with taxes payable 27. Question 2, you'll see we did have some comments in regards to this acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities language from legal counsel. That acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities is a direct statutory quote, and legal counsel recommends leaving both those terms in the question. So that was some feedback that we had when we were doing a review of what the ballot question and potential changes to the question. There's the tax rate in question 2, and you can see here that 3.427%, and then the draft ballot language as it's presented with a few changes from what we had last time. The second option changes And both these were showing, subject to a rate of inflation, the $42 or the $46 per month at $1,740.97. Everything reads identical, but you can see the contingency language that's built into the second option on the capital project levy. So the question reads identically above, but when you get to the bottom of the ballot, you can see if question 1 is approved, shall capital project levy proposed by the School Board of Independent number 719 also be approved. And what that means is if question 1 fails, question 2 fails too. So I think, but that is obviously an option as part of the ballot constructs that we're presenting. So that is the information we had, and we can take any questions.
Initially, you started out your presentation regarding the inflation factor. And so these are with an inflationary factor included. I think, just from the things that have been presented to the board in the past regarding if an inflationary factor would have been part of our past, the tax impact to the community wasn't much different. But the impact to the district as far as funding would have been huge. Inflationary factor, I think, is really important, so I'm grateful for that. Another question, I guess, the contingency, okay, so the contingency of the first passing to, if the first doesn't pass, the second automatically doesn't pass. I think one of my concerns and one of the thoughts that I keep I'm wrestling with is making the ballot as understandable as possible for the average voter. I know that there's been a lot of talk legislatively about the struggle of the voting yes. There's talk legislatively. I know that won't have anything to do with this November, but there is expected to be a constitutional change on the ballot. So there are several things that is potentially going to affect the district that is coming up on this November ballot. And I think that what we are learning is that this levy ask, this may be one of the most important ones our district has ever faced. I mean, arguably, it is. And so I think when we're looking at all of these things, all of the two different options that we're faced with here, the different ballot, or the different with the capital project, whether that's contingent or not contingent, it's a lot to take in and come to consensus. I just feel like I want to help in any way I can or encourage the board, if we can come into agreement, consensus as much as possible over the amount of that we place on the ballot, as well as the language, I think it will increase our likelihood of passing it. And so I know I didn't really give a question. I'm just kind of talking. This is, it's a really important decision that we have before us. And I guess if I were to make a question that makes sense to you and that you could maybe answer, is contingent versus non-contingent. Is there, does one way versus the other increase chances of passing, or does it decrease? The multiple questions, I guess that's just a concern of mine, is having the multiple questions on the ballot that affect the school district. And knowing the importance of them, I just want to set the district up as best for success in this, and not failure, because, you know, our last passed levy was back in 2017, and we've gone out twice since then. So, again, I'm probably more just talking out loud and processing out loud than asking a really coherent question. So I don't know if you have any comment on all that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say every district's situation is a little unique, right, when you're presenting a ballot question. And you're no different, right? This is a unique spot to be out asking a question at this point in time where you need revenue right away, right? But you also have this future adjustment that's happening as part of your future levy that instead of asking one question a day and coming back another year later and asking another question, you could present it right now, right? And I think there is some validity, either you have to go out and really communicate that you're gonna come back and ask a question right away, right, as part of the campaign, or you have to do a good job of communicating right now what these forecasted opportunities are and the things that are gonna be happening as part of the levy. Now, from the contingency perspective, there's typically a diminishing return on questions, right? It doesn't really matter whether the second question is gonna be zero impact or not, right? Typically, the second question has a lesser success rate than the first question, right? Even if there is a net change that's zero, right? I mean, we've seen it in renewal questions that have been presented as a second question, right? There's no text change, but those have failed at times too, right? So that's just a fact of kind of the numbers, right? And that's what we see over time is that second question typically doesn't have as high of a yes rate as the first question.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Mike, okay, so what you shared, I have a question regarding if we came back in a year. So the what drops off, if we were to come back in a year for that second question, how much of a cost savings is trying to, ask both? Is there a cost savings around that?
So right now, it would be more costly to come back in a
To
year.
come back in a year?
Because we would be coming back on our own, and right now we're going through a general election cycle, so
Got
it's
it.
distributed significantly, so
Like you shared
it would
that
be very
before.
costly.
Yes.
I think going back to Vice Chair Olsted's point too about how long do operational levies last and how frequently are they coming back? I think to Director Ryder's point in response to that is that based upon the factors that are continuing to rise around expenditures throughout districts K-12 in the metro, the shelf life of a levy isn't always 10 years as they may have been in the past. I think a couple of weeks ago, we talked about some districts addressing that by doing a stepped levy approach so that they didn't have to come back multiple times. And we also can acknowledge that a stepped levy approach is very unique. It's not very common. And so that does lead to more confusion likely at the polls. And so that was a discussion that we had here as well. To your point, Chair Bolian, keeping the language clear and concise is going to be absolutely critical, no matter what the ask is in this day and age. And I think our team obviously is very committed to doing that. And so to prevent unnecessary costs for running a levy on our own, I would highly encourage the board to consider the capital with in the same conversation next November with the delayed payment for a year out when that debt falls off. And we note that statute, even though this would not be a tax increase, unfortunately on that question, but we still have to have that language. It's a tax, this will be a tax increase. And if you really want to unpack the logic behind that, yes, technically a family would have realized an additional $17 to their family budget. And because we're going to allow for that to occur, then we're effectively paying that $17. So even though it's not real money out of pocket, that is the technicality around the statute of why we need to have that language. So just, again, trying to be as transparent as possible by law. So that's something on there. And then lastly, I'll just, or two more things, I'm sorry, if I may. So the permanent school fund amendment, that's going to be on the ballot this November, separate from our conversations, will be a very good thing for public education. And I think there's a lot of bipartisan support around that as well. So that will allow us to be more in alignment to what you see with higher education endowment funds. And so we'll be able to net additional revenue from there at the district level. All districts would be able to net more resources, but that's a constitutional amendment conversation or question. So the general public is going to be like, well, what is that question compared to what you're asking us at this question? Like, the timing couldn't be worse. I mean, it's a great thing, but the timing couldn't be worse. But it is what it is. We don't control that. So again, we will have to be really clear about our ask, because that actually is not a tax increase to anyone's income tax at all, or property tax. That is coming from land sales revenue. So we will make sure we message around that to kind of draw as much distance, but also encourage a yes for that. That would be great for our district. Actually, let me retract that. We would encourage people to get really informed about that, so that they can make a decision of what they would need to do around that question at the polls. Then lastly, with regards to ours, a couple of you have talked about this on different occasions. There is a significant urgency around getting a levy that passes. And finding that appetite with our community is like threading a needle, okay? And, you know, I think a couple weeks ago, there was a question asked about, well, a certain dollar amount in the past failed, so we should go asking something underneath that, when we do have a district to the south of us who went and they increased what they failed in the past, and actually they got it. So you just never know what the appetite is going to be, and just how small that eye in that needle is that we're threading, of what would actually tip a voter to support or not support a levy. One of the things that I think is absolutely critical, and I'll reiterate our chair, is that we know statistically having a level of consensus as a board to support going forward on a certain dollar threshold is going to be, will help determine the success of that levy. And I will say that what our students need, and dare I be so bold to say perhaps even deserve in many cases, is probably something that's not going to pass, right? The 67. And I'm just going to speak my truth from my vantage point as the superintendent and my connections with staff and community. And as a resident, I would be more than happy to pay that. I am also mindful of what our history has been, the conversations we've had as a board, and I have to take all that into account as we talk as a leadership team to determine where that sweet spot will be. I also have been very public historically, and I'll reiterate tonight, that there is a level of disingenuousness that I feel not asking for a certain dollar amount that's going to at least allow us to break somewhat even. And I think that's where that $32 comes into play, to kind of hold ourselves for about 3 years before we start having to have some different conversations. And then obviously that midpoint in between the 67 and the 32 currently is that $46 range, which gives us obviously a little bit more opportunity to do some things. Couple that, one of those two options, which is why we centered on that, because there was consensus in the conversation from our last study session. Thus, we've got the 32 and 46 out there. Now, you couple that with the capital levy, and that does afford some flexibility for the board to consider, namely some big changes that Director Ryder mentioned. So if utilities in and of itself were the thing that we utilized our capital levy for, that frees up the equivalent in general fund to do some other direct student support resource and investment. So you almost net an additional $3.8 million, or, I mean, you could not, the whole thing is 3.8, but you could net additional resources if you covered some of those utility costs that are currently being cross-subsidized through our general fund and put that onto the capital, and allow you to make some levels of critical investments. Again, to be determined, and that's the work that we would be doing over the summer to really articulate that for our community, what that would actually entail, because that was another point of feedback to say, if we say yes, what would that look like in terms of our ability to make investments? And now keep in mind, the 32 and 46 on that line graph that you talked about, the visual aid, doesn't give us a lot of latitude for making significant strategic investments, because it allows us to kind of carry forward for a certain amount of time. Again, yes, Director Franz, and by creatively braiding funding and being strategic, there may be moderate levels of some investments that could be made based upon, looking further into that. So I'm not saying a lot, but definitely would be something. As a board and as a team, and we've talked about this as well, like finding that balance between making an ask on behalf of the betterment of our students' future, and that's digestible, if you will, by our community and what that will entail. So, Chair, I just wanted to offer that context to the conversation this evening as well.
That's great, thank you for that. So, do you have more presentation, or you open for questions? Maybe we can go around, Director Atkinson, do you have questions for?
I do, thank you. I have a couple, actually. Question, how many districts are considering putting an operating levy on the ballot this fall? Just out of curiosity.
Well, there's a number that are considering putting on there. There's a number that you don't have statutory call for the election till August 11th, right? So formal action typically isn't happening by school districts until June, so.
But like, how many are having these conversations?
Many,
Many, okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Question, when it's contingent, I understand the constitutional amendment, so thank you for mentioning that. I'm excited to hear more about that as MSBA continues, launches that. My understanding with the constitutional amendment, though, if somebody votes no, if somebody does not vote on it, it counts as a no.
Correct.
Yeah, and so my question is if we have a contingency question, does that rule also apply? Or it is true just a count of the yes or the no?
It's just a count.
Okay, so it's not like the constitutional amendment, okay.
Right.
And then my other question is more for the district, for Director Ryder. Did you receive any guidance from Morris Leatherman? I know they're out doing surveys for some districts. Did you receive any guidance from them as far as like, there's just things that are going on within the state of Minnesota and within our economy, affordability, gas prices. You can't look at the news one day and not hear about the fraud. And so my question is, with all those factors in place, what is either Ellers, I think I asked for both guidance, like what is your guidance from either Morris Leatherman or Ellers on operating school board levies in general? Like, what are they hearing, the appetite from the communities?
So I did not reach out to Morris Leatherman, as we have not contracted with them for any type of survey or information. As far as the information as to how many, I'm sorry, your question exactly is, go ahead.
Just feedback. I mean, we used Morris Leatherman in the past, so I didn't know if it was just a simple question of like what they're hearing. I'm heard what the feedback was when there was another district that listened to their presentation, and they actually discouraged the board from going out for a levy, and they encourage the board to auto-renew their levy. And so I'm not saying that we should do this. I fully support going out for a levy. I'm just curious, like, in general, if they're going out and surveying the communities, given the different factors that are going on in the state of Minnesota right now, like, what is the appetite for levies in general? That's what I'm asking.
I would just say, Director Atkinson, and as was stated this evening, every district is unique. So there's,
Yeah, I
there's,
understand
so if you understand that, then there's no generalization that we can make to say that what one district did is going to serve our district or vice versa. So no, there isn't anything that we've heard in general that would meet our unique situation, other than the fact that the conversation that we had with Morris Leatherman in a formal way, that's 2 years ago. Unfortunately, in this day and age, 2 years is an infinity in terms of changes. So we can't even revert back to that survey with any kind of statistical credibility to say, and today this is what it should be. So to answer your question, there isn't anything that we are hearing that we would say would be applicable to our unique situation, other than our conversations that we've been having more locally and immediate and more recently.
Right, okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Mason, anything?
Nothing specific for elders, thank you.
France?
Yes, there's the graph for the AMSD that's out through 2026 that still shows the average formula allowance and per pupil. It shows obviously that gap widening. It's over $1,500 per student that we absorb, so obviously our revenues are nowhere near keeping up with expenses, and that's with every single district. Technically, we're quite a bit behind our peer districts, between $2,000 and $2,500 per student from what I can see with the levies that have been passed already, and those districts are going out for even more money. So, you know, so my concern is that, first of all, if we're gonna go with the capital, and we're gonna go with a lower amount rather than what we should be asking for, which is the 67, then the contingency is a must. But do we have any wiggle room on any of the language here on that contingency?
The contingencies language is straight out of statute, right?
Right, it has to be the full sentence
Yeah.
of the options
Yeah.
that we choose.
It has to read the way it reads, right? So it's very prescribed in statute how these questions have to read on the ballot. You do have some flexibility within the context of the capital project levy question, right, with what you're calling out after that, where it says the additional revenue for the proposed authorization for acquisition of betterment of school sites and facilities. After that line, that has some flexibility. But the rest of the question largely has to read the way it reads.
So we could take out the whole acquisition and betterment of facilities. Would that prevent us from using the money for utilities?
Yeah, you do not want to remove that part of the question. That provides the flexibility for the district to use the dollars the way you
facilities, right?
can use the dollars over the 10-year period, provides flexibility, and that's a direct statutory reference right from the capital project levy statute, that language.
I guess my fear is that people reading this and getting, particularly with the number of early voting and mail-in ballots, they're gonna see that and think we're getting another building and we're putting on another roof or something like that, which, you know, we did do, and we have no intention of doing again, at least until their warranties are expired. So I'm just wondering what the options are, because I mean, and I want to reiterate that it just seems odd that we are going forward to barely tread water still. And it's just a hard sell in any community to do that. So just wondering, any flexibility we can have And I understand that the language is there, so you can't mark it in a vote. You can't put anything in there that can skew it one way or the other. You have to be 100% bland and consistent across all jurisdictions. But is there anything that you've seen that we could do to maybe not, unfortunately negatively almost mislead a community that may be reading this?
Director France, I would say that, yeah, I understand the question, and, clearly, through the advisements of our own attorneys, the language in that ballot question will remain as is. I think what you're getting to is actually the campaign language. That's where we would have, that's where that conversation takes place, to ensure that folks understand, well, this doesn't mean a new building. Even
Right.
though it says it here, statutorily, we have to say this, but our campaign is gonna have to be the dominant message and the dominant narrative.
But the more confusing part is, you're not getting anything new for the people that want gifted and talented and all this stuff.
Understand the moderate
We can't even
investments,
come
I
close
get that, yeah.
to doing any of that.
That is the reality that's before us, that we've depicted in the scenarios earlier this evening, yep.
I think that's the hardest sell of
Yeah.
all, is that there's been so much pain now because we've had to further cut and our revenues aren't coming and we're close to what we should be giving our students and what we, and what our surrounding districts are able to do. It just seems like it's a hard sell overall without adding something in there to say, hey, this is something we can at least, add back in, so to speak. I think that's the hardest, that's the thing that I'm struggling with here by going with the lower amount.
I can empathize, I said this 2 years ago, that's the disingenuous piece that I felt inside. I'm not saying that that's what we were doing, but that was the feeling that I carried, that I spoke to. And I think we're in a similar situation to what you're suggesting right now.
Well, I think, if I may, one thing that I think about when you're saying that is that we have to remember that locally is just one part of the equation. We have the state and the federal, and, there has been so much advocacy, consistent, we're not in a funding year, but there is one-time funds that, have been approved or that are looking to be approved. I think, just remembering that our continued advocacy, next year is a funding year, and I think, I understand what you're saying, Director France. I think, like Dr. Thomas said, he's talked about this even the last time we went out for a levy. And when it failed, it was like, it was hard to ask for something when you weren't giving, you aren't getting anything more. But I think we have to be really mindful about what is going to pass, given the importance of this, and in hopes of changing in funding formula possibly. That's been being talked about a lot, just the different, there's different players in it than just local.
But that realistically, with the cuts at the federal level, they're never gonna come close to closing that gap. So, but I don't want someone to go out and say, well, we're gonna get it from the state or the federal.
For sure, and I'm not
That's
saying that
not
either.
happening, yeah.
But I think that, when we're advocating as board members, community, I just think there's a lot of factors at play, and it's hard to, make the community feel like they're the only ones.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that they're aware and that they're, that we're going to have to go out again. And that what we're doing is we're trying to maintain home values by not cutting anymore. And I think that, it's kind of like we're paying the same amount if more for the candy bar or for the bag of chips, and yet it's smaller. So they're still getting the bag of chips, there's just a heck of a lot of chips in it. And that Kit Kat shrunk quite a bit, actually, for the same price. So that's just, you know, that's just, that's a that's a harder message to sell. While we are saying in the same line, whether it's true or not, particularly on the capital part, that you're increasing taxes. And if you by any chance get that magic language that's working someplace else in a equally tax-averse district, then please share.
And I'll just add, you'll see questions, right, that are technology only that do not have that language in there, right? But the legal counsel or election counsel this time is recommending, right, with flexibility to do exactly what Lisa was talking about as statutory changes happen, right? That it gives you flexibility to use those resources the most flexible.
Director Smith?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I have many questions, I think just kind of continuing the conversation of, I understand in concept the purpose of a levy ask and then pairing that with the capital projects levy, because it does delay some of that, and it is a good way to market, again, that drop in our debt in the next couple of years. I do wonder if the goal is, for simplicity's sake, just keeping things simple, because I think some of the rationale around these choices might be, well, if we're going for a capital levy, then 46 would do the trick. Add another 3.8, that gets you to roughly 67. I know that's certainly the logic that I've used. But for simplicity's sake, because, there is all sorts of ways that this can be interpreted, to Director Francis' point, they might think, oh, this is a new building. You don't need a new building, you just closed a building. I'm wondering if just asking one question for the amount we need is the way to go. I'm not expecting you to have an answer for that, because who knows, right? But I think that is something that we, as a board, do need to possibly consider and talk about. And like I said, I get the rationale of what we have before us here right now, but I keep hearing about this being complicated, and we really like something simple. And even though there is technically no tax increase, there's still a tax increase because of just kind of how, it's not like Monopoly where you can say, oh, I'll trade you this and, I'll get that later. So I get it. And I think equally, as has been kind of said, is, and I've said it at this table, and because it's been repeated so many times to me, just being clear about what the plan is, regardless of the route we choose. What is the plan for spending the money? I get part of it is just treading water. But I do also recall from the survey that there were some targeted investments that we could make if we went the $46 route. It wasn't a lot, but it was something. So I just think that it is, and even, with the utilities and the capital project levy, yes, there are ways to, again, market that and campaign that. And I do think that, to go back to, Director Ryder, what you provided with the financial projections, I think that tells the story right there. Because it's clear where the district is heading. If we go one route, we are able to make some targeted investments. And if we do that, I think the other important piece to clarify is that it was mentioned that the district isn't accounting for declining enrollment. Dr. Thomas and his team have said repeatedly that they are accounting for a declining enrollment. That is why there's $3 million in reductions every year. And I would also like to say that this to correct something else that was stated, this is a balanced budget. When you look at the adjustments, the net perm adjustment to expense, we've cut $4 million this year. And then there's projected to be 3, and then 3, and then 3. If you do the math, and it's simple math, if you do that, your expenses match your revenue. So this is a balanced budget, and I think it's important to be very clear about that too. So there is all sorts of things that are going to be working against us as we try to articulate why this is so important. I'd love it if we could get as much money as we can to help as many students as we could. That trade-off just might be too big of a risk. But I also wonder if it's just, if for simplicity's sake, if we just go for and I know, Dr. Thomas, you just said your recommendation would probably be the 2 questions, I think. But I wonder if it's just simpler to go the other route because we know it and then it's, it's done. So, I don't know. Again, no questions. Just get out of my way. No questions for you, but again, thank you for being here, providing this, and I guess there is one question. Did we strike other language from the capital project, or was it just the acquisition piece?
But there was some other language that we pulled out too.
Okay.
Last time, per the
But
board
that was
conversations.
I think the difference there is that was the whole thing. We weren't kind of parsing out like acquisition or like, so if we took out to the point of, where is it? The acquisition and betterment of facilities, like if we took that whole thing out, that's not a problem. But it's that we're taking out a piece of it. That's the
No.
problem.
No, that's
No,
recommended by election council to leave that section in, and then.
The entire
We
section,
had
right.
it out initially per our conversation last time and our.
Oh, I thought we kept betterment, but maybe not.
Acquisition was struck.
Yeah, acquisition.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
acquisition.
But they said the whole thing is in statute and just leave it as
It's
is.
actually a call out right in the statute, right?
Okay.
So in that language, you'll see it in the vast majority of questions that you see, specifically in bond questions too. It's the lead-in of most of these questions that are related to capital.
Yeah, and I guess that was just my question, because I was looking through my notes, I can't find if there was anything else struck, but I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any problem with that, but it sounds like there
Yeah,
wasn't.
we had a couple other things. Director Ryder, do you have that list?
I do. Let me just pull it up here quick. So we covered this in our Finance and Operations Committee, Advisory Committee. So let me just pull up that material quick. So, May 12th. Okay, so what we did there is, in summary of what the board had discussed that was number 4, we had renovation projects was struck as well.
Yep,
We left the rest of it for further dialogue.
yep. And there was no problem with renovation projects being taken out of there, right?
No.
Okay, great. I did a poor job of explaining that, but I'm glad that we got to the answer, so thank you, appreciate that.
Director Olson had a,
I do, but, Director Johnson.
yeah, I thought you had a quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is very quick, but it can be.
Director Johnson, your questions?
No question for the presenter, just thank you for being here. Just quick thought, I agree that simplicity is, I think, the best thing. And utilizing the fact that we will have a tax drop-off in the upcoming year in the levy campaign, I think would be optimal within the campaign to assist in getting it to pass. I think it will be already an uphill battle, just knowing what we've faced in the past, and everything else I think we'll discuss more.
Super quick. On the ballot this fall, with the constitutional question, and then our question or questions, do those, are they in a certain order? I know every ballot is different for, so that they're not all the same. Any idea which
I
one
don't-
would go first, or
I
would
don't
it
know that-
actually
I
vary?
don't know that answer. So,
I believe, Danny, I don't know if Martha shared this with you on her departure, but I believe we are on the backside, middle bottom.
That's what I saw
Okay,
from her.
backside, middle bottom is where our question would be.
And then the land trust.
That I'm
one
not too
would
sure.
Probably be, I mean, I would imagine, I don't think there are any other questions. Right? For us this November,
Or after the judges.
that we know yet,
Yeah, I
right?
I don't
In
remember.
terms of like questions. I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
For us this November? Okay.
Yep.
I was just curious.
I do have a question kind of based on, and I don't know if this is a question for you, but it's kind of based on, Director Smith, your comment regarding, for simplicity's sake, and given the fact that this is our study session where we're rolling up our sleeves and kind of able to listen to each other's thoughts, your thought of simplicity's sake, increasing the ask and maybe not, for simplicity's sake, and maybe not doing the second question. Do you have thoughts based on that?
I will say everybody's unique again,
Yeah.
right? But I will say that you've got a complexity there too, right? Of trying to explain a decrease that's gonna come in the future year.
Right.
So I don't think either way you present this question, that complexity goes away,
The way,
right? You're gonna present a higher tax impact
Yep.
on the front end, right? If you chose the higher number. And I'll just say one thing with this ballot. I mean, these ballot questions, you guys are not unique, right? I mean, from the standpoint, this is the way these questions have to be presented. And I think, yes, they are confusing at times, right? But it's not that, you're not playing in a field that other people aren't playing in, right? So I think that's an important piece of this conversation. There's other factors that are probably more important to whether these pass or not than what the ballot question reads.
Yeah, sorry, Director Atkinson.
Yeah, Director Bullion, I think one thing that just kind of came to mind is that we could go, correct me if I'm wrong, to the ballot in 2 years with that capital levy, knowing that people will then, by that time, will they see the dip in their taxes?
The
And then
decrease-
that's a midterm election, so we would then not incur, it wouldn't be a special election at that point.
Yeah,
You know
there
what I'm
would be a
saying?
decrease after, 28 is when the decrease would happen.
Yeah,
there
so they
be-
would get their tax statements and be like, oh, wow, my taxes just dropped. And then go back to the voters, showing them that you're basically asking for the same amount that dropped. So that's something that can, if we want to keep it simple and perhaps think about that second question coming up in 2 years, I think that that's an interesting option as well. Because I do think the 2-question thing is very complicated. I think it's more complicated to try to explain it to our community, to the general voter who doesn't maybe pay as much attention to what's going on in our school district.
Chair Bullion,
yes.
would it be possible to ask for that step-up question also? Example ballot, I thought we saw it a week or 2 ago. But just to take a look at that again, the step-up.
It's in board book. I mean, we don't have it
Yeah.
for tonight, but it is in board book from our last session that you all can reference and see what other districts have used in terms of that language.
From the complexity standpoint, I'd just like to compare the 2 options with that one. I guess what I'm really going at is a fear, particularly with our economy the way it is, to depend on going out again in a couple years.
I agree. I mean, I think that it's valid, and what I really appreciate is that there's complexity whichever way we look at it. And so we can, I think it was the will of the board to move forward without the step up, for simplicity's sake. And, to go back, time is an issue. Yeah. I hear what you're saying, and I don't know if you're asking if it's for the will of the board to have the district bring back forth that.
I'm wondering if it would be, yes, I am. I'm asking if it would be worthwhile to have the three options, the single ask, the two options, and then the step up. And just kind of
yeah.
compare them for for complexity purposes. Because I really, my gut tells me we won't be able to go out in a couple years and be successful if we don't try to do whatever we can now in that concept of step up while the bond levy actually tails off. That doesn't sound so complex anymore compared to the two options, to tell you the truth. That's my, yeah.
Dr. Thomas?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's in board book, so you all can take a look at that. I think the fact that just in the immediate metro, there's only 2 or 3 districts who have found success in that, I think it's just, it's very uncharted water. And given our history here, I'll just be honest, speaking from my vantage point as a superintendent, I think that would be actually more complex for this community than the conversations that we're having tonight. And as many of you said, we're choosing an option that's the least complex, but there's going to be complexity in this. I think Director Smith mentioned, kind of mathematically accumulate the ask into one operational ask that would be the same effect of the smaller operating plus the capital. Makes sense, and I'll just go back to, I think, a comment Director Atkinson might have made a week or two ago, when you then have that number as the sticker shock, because that's the lead story, and now people are processing that number, and that's all they see. So there is a psychology to this whole conversation of what's plausible to the eye that I don't immediately have a natural psychological revolt to, that I'll internalize and process, and then with an accompanied strong messaging campaign would likely lend my support, okay, or whatever decisions that ultimately that they were made. But for us, we're hoping that we get resources for our kids. So that's why I'm going back, and I get the resources that I believe that we need to do the types of deep investments that we've heard through our community engagement sessions is not going to come at the tune of $32 and $46. It's just simply not. And I think we've walked through the numerical graphs and the line graph that illustrates that point. And I also understand the notion of proof concepts and success breeding success. And as we demonstrate our ability to get the outcomes for our kids, albeit some of those minimal investments that we are able to make, showing that to this community means something. And then to come back to have a conversation at that point to say, in the natural cycle of things in 2028 or whatever, or 28, 29, to say, okay, with this investment that we've made with you all, this is what we've been able to do. We now know that this is working and we would like to accelerate that. Here's our ask, right? So there's a stepped approach that can almost be had, if you will, but it comes also with results showing back as well. So, I mean, that's something for the board to think about or consider, but think about what that dollar amount can be to at least get some initial investment at a moderate level versus nothing, or not nothing, but versus kind of remaining neutral. And I think that's when that case would actually make sense. And that would lean then towards that $46 amount.
If it's okay.
Yeah, please.
You know, when I look at the comments from the survey, I'm not, and again, it was nowhere near a good population sample, given the number of people and the number of voters that we have. And I don't know if it's possible to even do an empirical study at all in any type of environment when 60% of our community doesn't really have a nexus of a student in going to school here. But it was very, very polar opposite with the comments. It was either, yeah, I'll pay the 46 or the 76 because I don't like what's happening with all the budget cuts and, you know, and the reputation of our district going down. And then the other half is no, you guys you gotta spend less. You know, you're not balancing your budget and all that, you know, and obviously the only thing we're doing is cutting. That's all we've been doing. So it's, the psychology of it is, I'm not quite sure those people would ever vote for a levy of any number. But by taking the ones that would vote and would be more inclined and can read financial statements, by the way, because they've been pretty clear and transparent, I believe that population would vote for the higher amount. I'm not sure we can ever turn the other population. So by coming in the middle, we're hurting a lot more than we are gaining. You know, and that's just what I'm seeing from the psychology of the people just about in every single levy election we've had here. They're never gonna vote regardless of the amount. Even if they say the amount was too high, they wouldn't have voted for it anyways because they don't want ever, you know, they don't want to vote for anything that's gonna increase their taxes at all, particularly if they don't feel any involvement in the local school system. So I just want to throw that out there, that we're not making a decision where we're cutting off our nose to spite our face.
Chair Brilliant,
Yes.
what are you hoping to get out of this discussion? I'm not sure there are additional questions for others. Are you wanting us to come to a consensus tonight, or what?
I think that, I don't think, no, we're not, you aren't asking for a consensus, are you?
Well, it'd be helpful to kind of know where the board's at.
As
Yeah,
far-
Because, yeah, as far as kind of how we would begin building this out to come to you on June 8th for a recommendation for action.
Recommendation.
Because we
so-
will be voting June 8th, yes, no, on whatever
yes.
proposal.
We are voting on June 8th. And so I'm happy to, you know, similarly as we've done the last couple meetings, is go around and see where board members lie as far as,
Discussion.
Can I ask a question regarding timing?
Could you give some boundaries for that question about where we lie? Because otherwise, we could like actually create more
I think
options
that,
here.
I think that the boundaries would be what's in the packet. So we'd be looking at the 32 amount or the 46 amount. And then because what's presented.
Capital or no capital.
And capital or no capital. But I feel like the last meeting, we were in consensus, 6-1 regarding the capital. That everyone stated that they would be in favor of going forward with the capital ask.
So the two options.
And if we want the contingent question in
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
So.
Can I just
Director
get, I'm sorry,
Atkinson.
can I just get
Sure.
some clarification on the timing? So my understanding from the presentation tonight is the capital levy would have to be, we'd have to know what we're doing with the capital levy by June 30th. But we have some time still on the other levy, so that could come later. So my question is why are we voting on all of it June 8th?
Well,
when?
Well, couple of things. There were some assumptions that they would be contingent from our last conversation together. So that's why they were coming together that way. If you bifurcate as a board to just run a capital on its own, and allow that to essentially, pass, that without question one, another operating question, that's why
No,
we're.
that's not what I'm asking. I'm
Okay.
sorry, let me clarify. So statute, we have to have something submitted for the for the capital levy by June 30th because of the review or whatever, review and comment, I think is what you had mentioned. So as a board, we could make a decision on that piece of the levy. And then could we come back in a month and finalize the other piece of the levy, the operating levy?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so technically, yes, you could.
I mean, that's kind of what I would like to see done.
I think I would, yeah, I
think-
would flex on how, depending on the amount, so I guess.
Yeah, and for me, it's also just like knowing what is the tech levy for, because I think coming out of our last levy, one of the biggest concerns from the feedback we heard is being really clear and transparent of what that ask is, regardless of the levy. So we haven't seen, I understand the list, I understand that doing the list because it creates flexibility, but flexibility also really hurts us. I mean, I think the more clear direction, I mean, if we're gonna put in our marketing that this is gonna cover electricity costs, this is the ballot language, that's just what I would like to know going into the June 8th meeting, is what does this capital levy exactly cost? Because that's one of the reasons that I didn't support it, is because I thought it might have a negative impact on the first question. You know what I mean? Because I think it more, just like Director Smith said, it is critical that we find amount that that our community will support and keep it as simple and clean as possible. So,
Well, Dr. Thomas, I think what I'm hearing is that you'd like to hear some consensus from the board on how to build this out. I think that the challenge becomes, I'm just gonna speak from my vantage point for this presentation. I think the study session giving us the time to kind of, the district has heard all the thoughts from the board. And, I mean, if you'd like me to go board member to board member to see where they land tonight as far as, which dollar amount that they'd prefer, we definitely can do that, if that's helpful
So, yeah,
if that's helpful. And I know that it would be. I think what is challenging is like when Director Atkinson brings forth the different timelines and, I'm thinking about superintendent search, I'm thinking about all of these things at once. And there's just a lot going on. And so anytime we're pushing something back, this information in this board packet is with the understanding that, there will be board action on June 8th. If we can help tonight in any way, help the district in bringing forth that recommendation, I want to help support that. But just knowing exactly, the ask.
I would just say this. This has been a great discussion, and I think there's been a lot more information shared in thinking aloud as a board team with additional conversation. So, not that we're voting tonight, but I would be interested to know how has this conversation impacted the direction, of the board. Just gives us a sense, especially even if it's delayed. It helps the new administration understand the direction that we need to do a handoff as well. So that would be helpful. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm just
Yep,
gonna
yep.
ask that Matt's gonna leave then.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for being here.
So, yeah, so that's all I would say, and again, this is a new, again, through conversation, a new idea on the table to potentially have more time to flesh out the operating conversation, juxtaposed to a capital. And I think that, you have time, so we're not trying to rush, but again, I think there were some connections of, if these were coming together, that it kind of comes as a package if it's contingent. But if you want to peel that apart and allow for deeper discussion on the operating, that makes sense. But then to help understand how we would hand that baton in that conversation would be good to know.
Yeah.
And if nothing has changed, nothing has changed.
Well, I'm happy to start. I think after tonight's presentation and honestly, just kind of what I shared earlier, really hoping to get some consensus with the board on the ask. I know we have time in that, but, you know, trying to help the district in what they want to build forward. I think, for me, what I'm most comfortable with, again, knowing the importance of this levy, where we've been in the past, yes. So I'm gonna stop saying commentary. I'm gonna just share where I'm at. Where I'm at is the $32 amount with the capital in the 28. And that's where I'm at tonight. So given that, I jumped off the board first. Can we start with you, Director Smith?
Absolutely. Yeah, Director Franz, I absolutely hear you on the, you know, there are people that are gonna go vote no regardless of the amount. There are people that are gonna say yes for the amount regardless as well. It's the folks in the middle that we're trying to win over. I would go $46 and the capital.
Yeah, I couldn't in good conscience go for 32 and only have it last a little over a year. That wouldn't be, I don't believe that would be fair to the community at all or to our students. So I'm definitely at the 46.
Okay.
And with the capital as well.
Director Olstad?
46 with capital.
Okay. Director Mason?
Yeah, I mean, I toggle with balance too. So, I mean, obviously, as a parent and a board member, it would be much easier to have a higher dollar value for everybody. But I think, I just think I go back to the survey feedback of the amount of tax increase being unaffordable with 45 and the feedback from the recent survey on cost, tax impact, and affordability. And I just think there's just people that can't or won't afford that. So I'm risk adverse, and I guess I would go with a 32 also, because I think we have a much higher chance of it getting passed. I would also go with the capital on top of that, because I think that adds then some value, you know, assuming people would support that. I toggled a little bit on the contingency, I guess. I don't know. I know we didn't cover that. I think, obviously, it's more of an education thing, right? Because it's like, we don't want the capital without the operating, right? And I think that's what we're trying to achieve, but in the same breath, I don't know, the language almost, I think it's just the language I struggle with, makes it less appealing. But I guess, yeah, I think we have to go with the contingent language. I don't think we have a choice. I think that's where we land.
Director Atkinson?
Yeah, thank you. My head goes back to what has worked for our community in the past, and listening to our community is really, really important. I understand parents with young kids in our district who were really great about filling out the survey. I get it. I understand. Give all my money to the school district, right? I get it. I fully understand it. Even as a parent who, still has kids in the school, a little bit higher up in the chain, I would love to see some of the things that we've lost in the past come back to our school district. But there is the reality of there's a large portion of our community that either the kids don't attend our district or they're all grown up. It's really interesting to see how much of an aging community we have. And Prior Lake is a great place to live, so of course we want great schools. And when we moved to our district in 2011, we moved here for the schools. They were high ranked and everybody loved them and all that. So I think we have some unique challenges, just like every district has. And I think, again, we have to listen to our voters. Back in 2017, a levy went out, and it didn't pass. And the board was very conscious of putting out an ask that was lower than their previous ask, knowing that it had to pass based on the fact they had buildings and all that kind of stuff. So I support the 32. My concern with the capital, as I expressed previously, is that being able to be super, super, how do I say, clear about what that capital ask is for, because if you add the 32 of 15.7 million, I think it is, if I'm doing my math correctly, sorry, and then you add the 3.8 million, we're back to what we asked for 2 years ago as a total. So we're not really making an adjustment down from the dollar amount. I get it, there's a tax break, so I still have concerns with the capital levy. I absolutely do not support it being contingent, that frightens the heck out of me. And just knowing how important it is that this levy passes, because I don't know what the board's gonna do if it doesn't pass, to be honest with you. So, and people have asked me, what are we gonna do if it doesn't pass? And I don't think that question's really been answered, so I don't wanna get into that, but then it's an auto-renew situation, I believe, so, yeah. So I'm 32, I'm still have concerns about the capital.
Okay.
If the majority of the board supports that, I'll support that, but then I'm gonna advocate for us to be really, really crystal clear and transparent about what that ask is for, specific ask is for.
Director Johnson?
I am at $32 and, I struggle with the capital, knowing how the previous levies have gone, and I think we have to be very clear on what it's gonna be used for. And so I will at this time say with capital,
Thank you. Thank you, board members, for that. I think with all the conversation and, you know, kind of stating where we are, that it's helpful. It's helpful for the district moving forward, and it's helpful for all of us. So thank you for all the conversation and time around that tonight. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the major magnitude field trip report. And I will turn that over to you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Bullion, Board Directors. You have this report. We do it by statute every year just to list out our field trips of the year. So nothing to share other than we've got a couple that will happen this summer yet, June 13th through the 20th, as well as the 21st through the 25th for 2 tournaments and a conference that are in this budget cycle, and the July one will be in next year's budget cycle that will follow up on for next year's report. But outside of that, it's pretty straightforward, just fulfilling our requirement to share with you all what we've done for major magnitudes that we've done each year.
If any board members have any questions on that, we can take them now. Otherwise, we will move on. Director Atkinson?
I just have a comment. I'm so excited for the robotics team to go to Worlds in Houston. I attended with them 2 years ago, and it is an opportunity of lifetime. They call it the Super Bowl of robotics, so super excited to see that they're going on that trip. Yep. Or maybe they've gone on it. Sorry, they've already gone on it, so very exciting.
Anyone else? All right, hearing no more on that one, we'll move on to the next item, which is the language access plan. And I will turn that over to Director Chuka. Thank you.
Good evening. I think it was in your packet for review, right? So it's it's something that the state legislature requires as of last year that the board actually adopts. It's not a policy, but just a language access plan for our families who speak different languages or maybe need disability types of accommodations. So maybe like a good example might be a sign language interpreter for conferences for parents. So these are all things we already do. All we did was put it into this plan for your review, and no action needed for tonight. We'll look at that on June 8th, but I'm here tonight if you have any questions in particular for the plan.
Board members, any questions or comments for Director Chuka? Hearing none.
Well, great. Then I'll see you on this topic in 2 years when we have to review it again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and then the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's evaluation. But given the significant work ahead of the board and in the superintendent search process, Dr. Thomas is supportive of foregoing the formal superintendent evaluation process. Any feedback from board members that they wish to provide Dr. Thomas is always welcome. So if there's any questions or comments regarding that, we can take them now. Otherwise, we will move on to the next item. All right, hearing none. We will go, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent search, and it's just an update. Next on as a part of the next steps in the process, the executive committee is meeting to discuss superintendent contract language with Director Cothern on Wednesday in advance of the next board's special meeting, which is scheduled for May 26th at 6 p.m. So during that special meeting, the board will participate in interview training and determine the finalists. Any questions or comments on that? Hearing none, we will, next is policy, which we have none at this time. And with nothing else left on the agenda, I will adjourn us.
Can I
Yes.
just plug
Yeah,
one thing,
please.
just for our community too?
Yeah, please.
If you haven't had a chance, for anyone that hasn't watched the Q&A that MSBA
Yes,
did,
absolutely.
I absolutely recommend it. It was super helpful. I went back and watched it, so.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Director Mason. Anyone else have anything else they want to share before we adjourn?
On the weighted graded policy, grading policy, I know that was going to come back to the board. Just curious. What's that? June 8th. Oh, okay, thank you. So it'll just come back, not in a study session, but in a vote. Okay, thank you for the update. Mhm.
Can I just say thank you to Obi for sitting here,
Yes.
one of our first student reps that actually comes to study sessions, sits here and actually looks stuff up and understands what we're talking about and spends late nights here despite his school schedule and his lack of senior slide.
Yes, thank you, Obi. Thank you for serving this
Thank
year.
you. So excited to see you
All
cross
the
that
best.
stage. So,
Thank you,
so
guys.
exciting. Mhm.
Yeah. All right, everyone. We are adjourned.